In the quiet town of Point Pleasant, nestled by the Ohio River, whispers of strange occurrences began to ripple through the streets. It started with fleeting shadows, brief glimpses of something not quite human, but it was soon impossible to ignore. The townspeople spoke of a creature, massive, dark, and otherworldly, with glowing red eyes that cut through the fog. They called it Mothman. One chilly November evening, John Klein, a journalist with a taste for the strange, was driving through the back roads toward the town with his wife, Mary. The couple, after a long day of house hunting, found themselves speeding through desolate fields as night closed in. The headlights of their car illuminated the winding road ahead when suddenly something darted in front of them. John swerved, narrowly avoiding it, and the car skidded to a halt. In the quiet town of Point Pleasant, nestled by the Ohio River, whispers of strange occurrences began to ripple through the streets. It started with fleeting shadows, brief glimpses of something not quite human, but it was soon impossible to ignore. The townspeople spoke of a creature, massive, dark, and otherworldly, with glowing red eyes that cut through the fog. They called it Mothman. One chilly November evening, John Klein, a journalist with a taste for the strange, was driving through the back roads toward the town with his wife, Mary. The couple, after a long day of house hunting, found themselves speeding through desolate fields as night closed in. The headlights of their car illuminated the winding road ahead when suddenly something darted in front of them. John swerved, narrowly avoiding it, and the car skidded to a halt. Both shaken, they looked around but saw nothing. That is until Mary gasped. Across the field, perched on an abandoned silo, a figure stood motionless. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with enormous wings folded behind it. Its glowing red eyes burned in the distance, locking onto their car with an unblinking stare. John's heart raced as he turned to his wife, only to find her clutching her temples in pain. Without warning, Mary let out a sharp scream as if something unseen had invaded her mind. 2 days later, Mary fell mysteriously ill. Doctors were baffled, as there was no apparent cause. She passed away within the month, leaving John devastated and with no answers. But there was something else, something terrifying. In her final moments, Mary spoke of a man, or rather, a creature, that had visited her in her dreams. She described it in vivid detail. The same figure they had seen that night, with the piercing red eyes. Grief-stricken and haunted by his wife's final words, John couldn't let it go. He needed answers. As he delved deeper into Point Pleasant's history, he discovered that the creature had been seen by many, always before something terrible happened. It wasn't just an apparition, it was a warning. The sightings of Mothman became more frequent. Locals reported seeing the creature hovering above buildings, standing in the middle of roads, or even lurking in their backyards. But more disturbing were the dreams. People claimed that the Mothman spoke to them, not in words, but in visions of destruction, of bridges collapsing, of death. It wasn't long before John began having these dreams too, dreams of catastrophe. One night, John awoke in a cold sweat, the image of a crumbling bridge fresh in his mind. He knew the bridge. It was the silver bridge that connected Point Pleasant to the other side of the river. The vision was so vivid, the screams so real, that he felt compelled to act. Something was going to happen, and soon. Desperate, John tried to warn the authorities, but they brushed him off, calling him paranoid and grief-stricken. His warnings fell on deaf ears, even as more and more people reported seeing Mothman, its glowing eyes haunting the town like an omen. The creature seemed to be everywhere, a silent herald of doom. And then, on December 15th, 1967, it happened. The Silver Bridge, crowded with rush-hour traffic, collapsed into the icy waters below. 46 people lost their lives as cars and trucks plunged into the river. The town was thrown into chaos, and among the survivors, many spoke of having seen the Mothman on the bridge just before the collapse. John stood at the edge of the river, watching the rescue efforts, knowing that what had happened wasn't an accident. The visions, the sightings, it had all been leading to this. The Mothman wasn't just a creature of nightmares, it was a harbinger, a messenger of some unknown force, warning them of impending disaster. But why? And more importantly, why had no one listened? As the days passed, the sightings of the Mothman dwindled, and eventually it vanished altogether, leaving the town with its grief and unanswered questions. John, haunted by the tragedy, returned to his home, but his life would never be the same. The creature still appeared to him in dreams, not as a warning this time, but as a reminder. A reminder that some things are beyond human understanding, that there are forces at work in the world that defy explanation. Years later, John would write about the events in Point Pleasant, hoping to piece together the mystery that had consumed his life. But even as he put pen to paper, he knew that the truth would remain elusive. The Mothman had come and gone, leaving only destruction in its wake. And somewhere in the shadows it waits, watching, waiting, and perhaps, one day, returning. John Klein's life had become an echo of unanswered questions and sleepless nights. The collapse of the Silver Bridge was a scar not just on Point Pleasant, but on his very soul. Though years had passed since that terrible day, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Mothman was still watching him, lurking just out of sight in the corners of his mind. In his new home, far from the river that claimed so many lives, John thought he had left the nightmare behind. But the nightmares persisted. At first, they were fleeting. A glimpse of those glowing red eyes as he drifted off to sleep. Then they became more vivid. He would find himself standing on the edge of a cliff, or at the mouth of a tunnel, or in the middle of a crowded street, always staring at some looming disaster. Buildings would sway, roads would crumble, and the air would be filled with the deafening sound of rushing water, fire, or the screams of strangers. But it was always there, hovering on the edge of his vision, the Mothman, watching. One particularly cold night, as John sat by his desk, surrounded by papers filled with notes and half-written theories about the creature, the power flickered. The lamps dimmed, and a chill ran through the room. He froze, the air around him suddenly heavy. Slowly, ever so slowly, he turned his head towards the window. There, perched on a tree just beyond the glass, were two glowing red eyes, piercing the darkness. John's breath caught in his throat, but he couldn't move. The figure outside was motionless, its wings folded behind it, just like the first night he had seen it with Mary all those years ago. For a long moment, neither of them moved. It was as though time itself had stopped. And then, without warning, the Mothman unfurled its massive wings and disappeared into the night, leaving only the whisper of the wind in its wake. That's when the phone rang. John's hand trembled as he reached for the receiver, his heart pounding in his chest. He pressed it to his ear, expecting to hear static or some disembodied voice. But instead, there was a silence on the other end. Just as he was about to hang up, a distorted voice, low and slow, broke through the static. "It is not finished." The words sent a chill down his spine, and before he could respond, the line went dead. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and mounting dread. Every creak in the house, every gust of wind outside, made John feel like he was being watched. The dreams grew darker. He saw not just the Mothman now, but faces, human faces twisted in fear and anguish, staring at him, pleading for help. And always, in the background, the sound of something breaking. A bridge, a tower, a city, collapsing into ruin. It wasn't until he saw the news that the dreams finally made sense. Reports came in from all over the country, strange sightings, mysterious figures, whispers of disasters to come. A dam in the Midwest was showing signs of structural failure. A series of earthquakes along the West Coast. Tornadoes touching down in towns that hadn't seen them in decades. It was happening again. The Mothman had been a harbinger once, and now it was warning John again. But this time, it wasn't just one town in danger. The destruction was far larger, more terrifying. John tried reaching out to people, friends, former colleagues, even the police, but no one would listen. He had become the man no one believed, the man obsessed with monsters and prophecies, and yet the evidence was there, creeping closer with each passing day. The Mothman had shown him the future once, and it was showing him again. Only now, The stakes were unimaginably higher. One evening, in the midst of this chaos, John received an unexpected visitor. A woman, her face pale and eyes wide with fear, stood at his door. She introduced herself as Laura Bennett, a researcher who had been investigating paranormal phenomena. She had read about John's experiences in Point Pleasant and believed him. She had seen it too. Not the Mothman itself, but signs. Strange happenings, just like the ones that plagued Point Pleasant before the bridge collapsed. Laura had been tracking the creature for months, piecing together sightings and patterns. According to her research, the Mothman had been appearing in towns and cities all across the country, always before some kind of disaster. It was no longer confined to one place. And now, it was showing itself more frequently than ever. Together, John and Laura began to dig deeper. They followed leads, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together the puzzle. And with each new discovery, it became clear. The Mothman wasn't just a warning of physical destruction. It was a symbol, a harbinger of something far more sinister, something beyond human comprehension. Some believed it was tied to ancient prophecies, others thought it was a messenger from another realm. But one thing was certain, it was growing stronger, and its warnings more dire. In a final desperate attempt to stop what was coming, John and Laura decided to return to Point Pleasant, the place where it all began. They hoped to find some clue, some answer buried in the wreckage of the past. But as they arrived at the foot of the Silver Bridge Memorial, a heavy fog rolled in, cloaking the river in an eerie, unnatural silence. And then, through the mist, the figure appeared once more, tall, dark, and foreboding. The Mothman. Its red eyes glowed brighter than ever before, and its wings stretched out, casting a shadow over the land. It seemed to beckon them forward, leading them toward the river, toward the place where so many had lost their lives. But this time John wasn't afraid. He knew now that the Mothman wasn't a bringer of death, it was a warning. And whatever it was warning them about was far from over. As the creature hovered above the water, John realized with a sinking dread that perhaps the Mothman wasn't here to save anyone. Maybe it was just watching, waiting for the inevitable. The world was teetering on the edge of something catastrophic, something beyond even his darkest dreams. And all they could do was wait. The fog thickened, swallowing the landscape around John and Laura until they could barely see each other. The air felt oppressive, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. The figure of the Mothman loomed ahead, unmoving, its wings spreading out like the night itself. John's voice trembled as he turned to Laura. What does it want? Why now? Laura stared at the glowing eyes, transfixed. I don't know, but I think it's showing us what's coming. Something worse. This is just the beginning. A sharp crack echoed through the air, like the snap of a tree branch, and both of them flinched. The ground beneath them trembled as if the earth itself were awakening. The fog seemed to pulse in time with the vibrations, thickening like a living thing, suffocating, pressing down on them. And in the distance, barely audible, was a sound that chilled them both to the bone, the faint rush of water, distant but unmistakable, like a tidal wave approaching from far off. The sound stirred a memory in John, a vision from his recurring dreams. His eyes widened. The dam, Laura, it's the dam. The one in the Midwest. Laura turned to him, her face pale with understanding. You think it's going to collapse? John nodded, his pulse racing. The dreams. It was always water, flooding, destroying everything. And it's not just the dam, it's everywhere. The earthquakes, the storms, it's all connected. A deep rumble reverberated beneath their feet, growing stronger with each second. The Mothman hadn't moved. It still hovered, eyes glowing brighter, watching them intently. John felt an overwhelming sense of dread. It wasn't warning them about a single disaster. It was warning them about a chain of events, a global catastrophe that was about to unfold. We need to warn them, John gasped, backing away from the figure. We need to tell someone, anyone, before it's too late. But as he turned to leave, something strange happened. The Mothman's wings began to beat, slow and deliberate, stirring the fog around it. The sound wasn't like the flapping of a bird's wings. It was deeper, heavier, as if the air itself was being torn apart. And then, with an eerie grace, it lifted into the sky, disappearing into the fog without a sound. Laura's eyes darted around wildly. John, it's gone. What do we do now? John didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the river, his mind racing. The creature had shown them the future before, and he had failed to prevent the tragedy. But this time it felt different. The weight of impending doom pressed down on him. This was no longer just a small-town warning. The world was on the brink of something catastrophic, and the Mothman had made sure they knew. Without another word, they raced back to the car. John's hands shook as he fumbled with the keys, but they were soon speeding down the road, the fog curling around them like ghostly fingers. Hours passed in a blur as they reached out to authorities, trying desperately to get someone to believe them. They tried the police, government agencies, even reporters. But the responses were the same: skepticism, dismissal, and occasionally mockery. The warnings were falling on deaf ears again, just as they had before. Exhausted and defeated, John and Laura found themselves in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, surrounded by their scattered notes and maps. The news played on a small TV in the corner of the room, showing images of the dam John had dreamed about. Engineers were being interviewed, assuring the public that everything was under control, that there was no need for panic. But John knew better. He had seen this before. That night, as they both drifted into a restless sleep, John's dreams returned, more vivid than ever. This time, he wasn't just a spectator. He was standing on the dam itself, feeling the cold concrete beneath his feet. The sky above was dark, swirling with ominous clouds, and the water below churned violently. And there, standing on the edge of the dam, was the Mothman. Its red eyes glowed brighter than the storm clouds, watching him waiting. Suddenly, the sound of cracking concrete filled the air. John looked down in horror as a jagged crack snaked through the dam, spreading like a wound. The rumble of water grew louder, more menacing, and in an instant the structure gave way. A wall of water rushed toward him, unstoppable, consuming everything in its path. John jolted awake, drenched in sweat, his heart hammering in his chest. He shot a glance at Laura, who was sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror. "I saw it too," she whispered. "It's happening." The next morning, the news was filled with reports. The dam had collapsed in the early hours of the morning, sending a massive flood tearing through towns and farmland, leaving devastation in its wake. Dozens were dead, hundreds missing. The very disaster John had feared. He sat in stunned silence, staring at the screen. Once again, the Mothman had shown him the future, and once again, he had been powerless to stop it. But this time, the realization was different. The disaster wasn't isolated. Reports were coming in from other parts of the country. A string of earthquakes had rocked the west coast, freak tornadoes had torn through the heartland, and an unprecedented storm system was forming off the eastern seaboard. It was all happening just as the Mothman had shown them. John stood, his legs unsteady. The world was unraveling, piece by piece, and the Mothman's warnings had gone unheeded for too long. Whatever force was behind the creature, whatever it was trying to communicate, humanity had failed to understand. Laura's voice broke the silence. "John, what do we do now?" He looked at her, eyes filled with both fear and resignation. "We wait." For the first time in his life, John understood the truth. The Mothman had never been there to stop the disaster. It was simply there to witness. And now so were they. The days that followed were a blur of chaos. News stations around the world could barely keep up with the growing list of calamities. Floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, and fires erupted in places that had never seen such devastation before. It was as if the earth itself was rebelling, tearing itself apart, piece by piece. John and Laura watched it all unfold, helpless. The nightmares didn't stop. If anything, they grew more intense. The Mothman appeared in every vision now, standing amidst the ruins, its red eyes unwavering, unfeeling. Each dream was worse than the last. Skyscrapers crumbling into the streets, entire cities sinking into the ocean, and faceless crowds running, screaming, but unable to escape the inevitable destruction. But the worst part, no matter where the visions took him, John always saw the creature, watching. One night, after a particularly brutal dream of a massive sinkhole swallowing an entire town, John awoke with a start. His chest heaved with panic, and the dark room felt suffocating. He stumbled out of bed, looking for something, anything, to make sense of the nightmare. But there was nothing, no explanation, no solution. Just doom. Laura found him sitting at the motel desk, staring blankly at a map. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of everything they'd seen. and the crushing reality that they were powerless to stop it. "John," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder, "we can't just sit here. We need to do something." He didn't look up. "Do what, Laura?" "We've tried everything. No one will listen." "They never do." "We can warn people. Maybe not the authorities, but someone. We can go to the places you've seen in your dreams. Tell them what's coming." John's hand trembled as he traced a line across the map. "And what if it's too late? What if no matter how hard we try, the Mothman isn't showing us these things to stop them, but just to make us witness it all?" Laura's grip tightened. "I refuse to believe that. There has to be a reason we're seeing this. There has to be a way to save someone." John finally lifted his eyes to meet hers. They were filled with a hollow kind of acceptance, the kind that comes after years of fighting an invisible enemy. "Maybe saving someone isn't the point, Laura. Maybe we were chosen just to know." Laura recoiled at the thought. No, there has to be more than that. We can't just be spectators to the end of the world." But deep down, John wasn't so sure anymore. He remembered Mary, her final words about the creature, her illness, her death. He thought about Point Pleasant, about the Silver Bridge, and the countless lives lost despite the warnings. The creature had never spoken, never directly intervened. It only observed, watched, and now it was showing them, him, what was coming next. 2 days later, the sinkhole from John's dream became a reality. A town in Pennsylvania vanished into the earth, just as he had seen it. The media scrambled for explanations, natural gas leaks, unstable bedrock, but John and Laura knew the truth. The visions had foretold it, and still the world refused to listen. The pattern continued. Each disaster played out just as John had dreamed, as if the future had already been written and there was no escaping it. People were dying, and the Mothman, silent and monstrous, hovered above the carnage, watching it all unfold. One night, after a particularly violent dream of a storm leveling the East Coast, John awoke to a new sensation. It wasn't fear, exactly, but a feeling of finality. He sat up in bed, staring out the window at the darkened sky, knowing deep in his bones that something had shifted. He knew what was coming. "Laura," he whispered, shaking her gently awake, "it's time." She blinked at him, confused and bleary-eyed. "What do you mean?" "I saw it. The final vision. The last one." Her heart skipped a beat. "What did you see?" John swallowed hard. It wasn't just a town or a city, it was everything. Everything was collapsing. The earth, the sky, the seas. It's the end, Laura. There's no stopping it." Laura stared at him in horror, the weight of his words sinking in. "How much time do we have?" John closed his eyes. The image of the Mothman's unblinking red eyes still burned into his mind. Not much. A few days, maybe. They spent the next morning in a haze of panic and desperation. There was no use trying to warn the world. At this point, it was far too late. Instead, they focused on preparing themselves, accepting the inevitable. It was a cruel fate, knowing the end was near and being powerless to stop it. That evening, as the sky turned a strange, unnatural shade of crimson, the air became heavy with a sense of finality. The birds had gone silent. The wind had stilled. The world itself seemed to be holding its breath. John and Laura stood on a hill overlooking the town, watching the horizon with a quiet sense of dread. They knew it wouldn't be long now. The visions had been clear. And sure enough, as the last light of day faded into darkness, the ground beneath them began to tremble. And there, silhouetted against the blood-red sky, the Mothman appeared. It hovered above them, its wings spread wide, its glowing eyes fixated on the horizon. The rumbling grew louder, the earth buckling and groaning beneath their feet. The creature didn't move, didn't react. It simply watched. John took a deep breath, his voice barely audible over the growing cacophony. "It's here." Laura's eyes were wide with terror, but she didn't scream. She simply grasped John's hand, squeezing it tightly, as the world around them began to fall apart. Buildings in the distance crumbled to dust, the earth split open in jagged lines, and the sky above twisted into a violent storm of fire and lightning. And still the Mothman remained. The end was inevitable now. John could feel it in his bones, in his very soul. He turned to Laura, his eyes filled with sorrow and resignation. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But there was no time for apologies. The world was ending, and they had been chosen to bear witness. As the ground beneath them gave way and the sky above consumed them, John's final thought was of the Mothman and the terrible truth it had shown him. Some things cannot be stopped. Some things must simply be seen. And in that final, shattering moment, as the world crumbled into darkness, the Mothman's eyes remained, watching. Always watching. The darkness swallowed everything, a crushing silence following the destruction. Time seemed to stop as the world slipped away, and for a moment, John felt weightless, suspended in the void between life and death, between the end and whatever came after. But then, a flicker of something stood out in the blackness, faint at first, but growing brighter. Red. Pulsing. Unmistakable. The glowing eyes of the Mothman. John wasn't dead. Not yet. The world around him was gone, erased, obliterated, but somehow in this void he remained. He tried to move, to find some sense of where he was, but his body felt detached, like he was drifting in a vast, endless space. And then he heard it. A voice, soft at first, but clear. It wasn't Laura's voice or any human voice he had ever heard. It was cold, distant, yet undeniably real. You have seen. John's heart pounded in his chest, though he couldn't feel his body. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. He strained to locate the source, but there was only the darkness and those burning red eyes. "Who are you?" John's voice trembled, his question more a thought than spoken words. "I am what you have feared. I am what you have sought. The witness. The end." The Mothman's eyes glowed brighter, illuminating the void, revealing glimpses of a fractured reality around John. For fleeting moments he saw flashes, memories of the disasters, of the lives lost, of the moments leading up to this final cataclysm. And then he saw Laura. She was there, somewhere in the distance, though she too seemed suspended, frozen in the same in-between place. He reached out for her, but his hand passed through the void like smoke. "You are not meant to follow her. You are not meant to escape." John's mind raced. What does that mean? Why am I here? Why did you show me all of this? Why did you let this happen? The voice seemed to rumble with ancient knowledge, as if it had existed long before humanity, long before time itself. You misunderstand. The Mothman's presence seemed to grow, its wings spreading wide across the void. It was never a question of letting. It was always inevitable. You were not chosen to stop it. You were chosen to witness. Witness what? John's voice cracked with desperation. The end of everything. Why? Why me? The red eyes burned through him, penetrating his very soul. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating, before the voice returned, colder than before. Because someone must, and that someone is you. The truth hit John like a punch to the chest. He wasn't special. He wasn't destined to save the world or stop the disasters. He was a spectator, a passive observer of humanity's demise. The Mothman, whatever it was, wasn't a savior or a destroyer. It was something far worse. It was the eternal watcher, the one who bore witness to the collapse of worlds, over and over again. John's voice shook with rage and sorrow. There must have been a way. We could have stopped it if we had known sooner. The red eyes blinked once, and the void trembled. There was no stopping what was set in motion, long before you. Long before your kind. You were given visions, yes, but the visions were not gifts. They were not warnings. They were reminders. John's heart sank. Reminders of what? That nothing lasts. That all things end. The same way they have before. The same way they will again. John couldn't accept it. The enormity of it, the sheer, hopeless finality. He had spent so much time believing that the visions were a chance to prevent disaster, that the Mothman was a harbinger of warning, a chance to save what was left. But now he realized the truth. The creature didn't care about saving anyone. It didn't care about humanity at all. It was simply there to watch the inevitable destruction unfold. The void seemed to pulse around him, distorting and reshaping. John felt himself being pulled deeper into the darkness, further away from Laura, from the world he had known. The Mothman's glowing eyes began to fade, but its voice lingered, cold and final. You are part of the cycle now, John Klein. You have witnessed the end, and you will witness it again. And again. No, John whispered, though he knew it was useless. Please no. But the voice was merciless, unrelenting. All ends, and so it begins once more. With that, the darkness consumed him completely. John awoke with a start, gasping for air, his heart pounding in his chest. The world around him was familiar, too familiar. He was in his car, driving down a dark road. Next to him, Mary sat, smiling, flipping through a brochure for a new house. The soft hum of the engine, the radio playing faintly, the winding road illuminated by the headlights. It was the night it all began. John's hands clenched the steering wheel, trembling. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. How was he here? Was it a dream? A nightmare? John, you okay? Mary's voice was soft, gentle, just as he remembered. But before he could respond, before he could make sense of it all, a shadow darted across the road. John's heart leaped into his throat, and he slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. Mary gasped, gripping the armrest. What was that? John's breath caught in his throat. He knew what it was. His eyes darted to the side of the road, where it stood just as before. Tall, dark, wings folded behind it, and those terrible, glowing red eyes. The Mothman. The cycle had begun again. The world was doomed to repeat its fate, over and over, with John trapped inside it, forever watching the end, unable to stop it. And as the creature stared back at him, John realized with a sinking horror that this was his eternity. To witness, to remember, to suffer. The Mothman spread its wings and vanished into the night, leaving John alone in the silence of the road, knowing all too well that the nightmare had only just begun. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of time, the Mothman watched, waiting for the world to fall apart once more. John sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, staring into the empty darkness where the Mothman had vanished. The world outside was silent, but inside, his mind was a storm of disbelief and terror. He turned to Mary, his heart pounding, expecting to see her face, her confused, worried expression, as it had been that fateful night. But she was already gone. The seat beside him was empty, and the car's engine hummed softly in the still night. The road stretched ahead, the same endless stretch of asphalt he'd driven countless times in his memories. He glanced at his hands on the wheel, willing himself to wake up from this nightmare, but the reality pressed in around him, heavy and suffocating. He was trapped. The headlights flickered once, twice, then dimmed, plunging the road into near-total darkness. And yet, in that deep void, John felt a familiar presence. Not just the Mothman, but something larger, more pervasive, the weight of time folding in on itself, reality unraveling in ways he couldn't comprehend. There was no escaping this. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, breaking the silence. Static hissed through the speakers, followed by distorted voices, words bending and warping as if coming from another dimension. You have seen. John's heart leaped into his throat. The voice, it was the same cold, detached presence he'd heard in the void. The same voice of the Mothman, or whatever force existed behind those red, glowing eyes. It seemed to be everywhere, filling the air with its resonance, pressing in on his skull like invisible hands. It will begin again. You cannot stop it. John slammed his hand on the dashboard, a surge of frustration rising in his chest. Why? He shouted, his voice breaking with desperation. Why show me if I can't change anything? Why trap me here? The radio hissed and crackled, the voice responding with calm indifference. You are not here to change. You are here to know. John's breath hitched, his mind reeling. What does that even mean? He muttered under his breath, though deep down he knew. He wasn't meant to save anyone. The Mothman had never been a beacon of hope or warning. It was an instrument of fate, a cold observer of the inevitable, and John was its unwilling companion in this endless loop. Suddenly, the road ahead was bathed in light, bright, unnatural light that cut through the darkness like a blade. John blinked against the intensity, his heart racing as he realized what was coming. The same moment, replaying again. The figure appeared in the center of the road, just as it had that night so long ago. Tall and looming, its wings draped behind it like the cloak of death itself. The Mothman stood in the middle of the road, its red eyes glowing like burning embers, watching him. John felt the car surge forward on its own, the engine roaring louder, pushing him toward the creature. His hands gripped the wheel tighter, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't steer away. He was trapped in this moment, hurtling toward disaster, powerless to stop it. As the car approached, the Mothman spread its wings wide, and for a split second, John saw something in its eyes, not just the cold detachment of an observer, but something deeper, something ancient. It wasn't malevolent, not in the way a human might understand. It was simply there. A force beyond reason, beyond time, existing only to watch. The car hit the figure, but instead of the impact John braced for, there was nothing. No crash, no sound. The Mothman vanished as the car passed through the space where it had stood, leaving only the ghostly afterimage of those terrible red eyes in John's mind. And then everything went black. John awoke again, the same sensation of weightlessness pulling him from unconsciousness. This time, he found himself standing in a vast open field. The sky above him was a bruised shade of purple, swirling with storm clouds that seemed to pulse with energy. The air smelled of ozone and earth, as if a storm was about to break. He turned in a slow circle, disoriented. The landscape stretched out endlessly in all directions, barren and silent. And there, on the horizon, he saw it. The Mothman, perched atop a crumbling hill, its wings folded, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. John knew instinctively that he was no longer in the world he once knew. This place was different. A liminal space, a fragment of something between worlds. The end of one reality and the beginning of another. "Where am I?" John whispered, his voice swallowed by the vast emptiness around him. The creature didn't move. It simply stared at him, its eyes unblinking. John closed his eyes, the weight of those words crushing him. He had no memory of the countless times he'd lived through this before, no recollection of the lives he'd witnessed fall apart. But deep inside, he knew it was true. This wasn't his first time. He had been here before, on this precipice, standing in the ruins of a world he couldn't save. "Why me?" John asked, his voice breaking. "Why choose me to witness all of this?" The air seemed to shift, and for the first time, the Mothman moved. It unfolded its wings and lifted into the air, gliding silently toward him. As it hovered above him, its eyes locked onto his, and John felt something pass between them, an understanding cold and infinite. Because someone must. And then, in an instant, the creature was gone, vanishing into the stormy sky, leaving John alone in the endless field, with only the knowledge of what was to come. The cycle had begun again. And John Klein, the eternal witness, would watch it all. Again and again. Forever. John remained on his knees in the barren field, the sky swelling with tempestuous clouds overhead. His body felt heavy, as if the knowledge of his fate was crushing him from the inside out. The Mothman was gone, its presence a fading echo in the air, but its words lingered, because someone must. The weight of those words settled deep into his bones. He had become a part of this cosmic, eternal cycle, a prisoner of fate's cruel repetition. There was no escape, no salvation, no purpose beyond witnessing the inevitable destruction over and over again. But as he sat there in the field, another thought began to creep into his mind. If this cycle was endless, if he had lived it countless times before, what if? What if there was something he hadn't yet realized? What if there was something he had overlooked in all these repetitions? With a surge of determination, John rose to his feet. The world around him felt unreal, like a dream that teetered on the edge of unraveling. The sky, the earth, the very air shimmered with an otherworldly haze, as if this place, this in-between realm, was nothing more than a fragment of his own mind. He had to find out if there was a way to break free. There had to be something. He took a step forward, and the ground beneath him shifted, rippling as though the fabric of reality was giving way. As he walked, the field transformed. The barren land twisted into something new, a familiar winding road, illuminated by the pale glow of his car's headlights. The night that had started it all. John's breath caught in his throat. He was back at the moment of his first encounter, reliving the night that had spiraled him into this endless nightmare. The scene was exactly the same. The dark, quiet road, the looming trees, and then, up ahead, the figure. The Mothman stood in the middle of the road, just as it had that first night, its red eyes glowing with the same cold, indifferent light. But this time, something was different. John didn't feel the same paralyzing fear. This time he felt something else, a clarity. He wasn't just a passive observer anymore. He understood now that he had been given these visions for a reason, even if that reason was twisted by cosmic cruelty. He had seen the end, over and over, but he had never tried to change what came after. He had accepted the role of the witness, but what if he could break it? What if he could stop the cycle? The thought consumed him. He could fight back. With a surge of adrenaline, John gunned the engine and sped toward the figure. The Mothman didn't move. It simply stared, its eyes glowing brighter as the car hurtled toward it. But John didn't flinch. He kept his eyes locked on the creature, willing himself not to blink, not to hesitate. If this was the moment it all began, maybe, just maybe, this was where he could end it. The car slammed into the figure, but there was no impact, no collision, no sound. Just nothing. The car passed through the Mothman as if it were nothing more than a shadow. A trick of the light. John slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt in the middle of the road, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He turned around, expecting to see the creature behind him. But the road was empty. The air was still, the night was quiet. And John was alone. For a long moment, he sat there in silence, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing. What had just happened? Had he missed his chance? Or was this all part of the loop, another step in the endless cycle? Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, not the Mothman, but a figure, standing at the edge of the trees. He squinted, trying to make it out in the darkness. It was Mary. John's heart lurched in his chest. He threw open the car door and stumbled out, his legs trembling as he ran toward her. She was standing still, her face calm, her eyes filled with a soft, knowing sadness. The closer John got, the more the world around him seemed to blur, the edges of reality fraying like an old, worn fabric. "Mary," he called, his voice cracking with desperation. "Mary, is it really you?" She didn't answer, but her expression was enough. She looked at him the way she had in those final days before her death, the same look of resigned understanding that had haunted him for so long. John stopped in his tracks, just a few feet away from her, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you?" Mary tilted her head slightly, her lips parting as if to speak, but the words never came. Instead, she lifted her hand, gesturing towards something behind him. John turned, his pulse quickening. And there, standing at the far end of the road, was the Mothman, its red eyes glowing brighter than ever before. But this time, something was different. The creature was no longer just watching. It was moving, slowly but deliberately, toward him. John turned back to Mary, but she was already fading, her form dissolving into the night like mist. His heart clenched with a mixture of sorrow and frustration. He had been so close to, what? Understanding? Escape? The Mothman loomed closer, its wings unfolding, casting long, ominous shadows across the road. But John didn't move. He stood his ground, staring into the creature's eyes, refusing to look away. And then something shifted. The ground beneath him trembled, the air around him thickening with an unseen force. The red glow of the Mothman's eyes intensified, filling John's vision until it was all he could see. The creature was no longer just a silent observer. It was speaking to him, not in words, but in feelings, in raw, overwhelming sensations. Time was folding in on itself again. John could feel it, the weight of countless lives, countless worlds collapsing in on this one moment. He was reliving the cycle, but this time there was no illusion of control. The Mothman wasn't just showing him the end. It was pulling him into it. John felt the ground give way beneath him, his body tumbling through the void, through the fabric of reality itself. The world around him shattered like glass, the pieces scattering into the dark, endless expanse. And all the while, those red eyes followed him, watching, waiting, drawing him deeper into the cycle. As the darkness closed in around him, John realized the terrible truth. He was never meant to stop the cycle. He was never meant to break free. He was always meant to become a part of it. The Mothman wasn't just an observer. It was a force, a manifestation of something far older, far more powerful than he could ever comprehend. And now, John was bound to it, caught in the eternal loop of destruction and rebirth, of witnessing and knowing. Forever. And as the last remnants of the world faded into the void, John's final thought was not of escape or salvation, but of the cold, unblinking eyes that had followed him through every moment, every vision. The Mothman watched. And now so would he. Forever. John's consciousness floated in the void, trapped in the endless darkness that stretched in every direction. Time ceased to have meaning. Seconds, minutes, hours, all were indistinguishable. He existed in the space between worlds, the void between cycles, a mere fragment of something larger, something unknowable. The Mothman's red eyes burned in the farthest corners of his awareness, always watching, always waiting. He could no longer feel his body, no longer sense the physical world, but he was still there, still aware. His mind twisted with the knowledge that this was it, the eternity that awaited him. There was no longer a question of escape, no illusion of breaking free from this nightmare. He was a part of it now, a piece of the cosmic mechanism that played out the end of worlds again and again. Then, without warning, the darkness rippled. John felt a sudden pull, like a great wave dragging him upward through the blackness. It wasn't gentle, but harsh, wrenching him from the void and thrusting him towards something new, or perhaps something old. The sensation of falling rushed back to him, his thoughts racing as he tried to brace himself for whatever came next. Light exploded around him, blinding, brilliant light. It burned at his senses, tearing through the black void, as if the fabric of existence itself was being torn apart. And then, with a jolt, he awoke. John was standing on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a city bathed in a twilight glow. The sky above him churned with dark clouds, and far below, the city seemed strangely still, as though it was waiting for something terrible to happen. The wind howled around him, biting at his skin, and for the first time in what felt like eons, John felt the weight of his body again, solid, real. He took a shaky breath, glancing around in confusion. Where was he? This wasn't Point Pleasant. This wasn't anywhere he recognized. But then he saw it. At the far edge of the cliff, perched on a jagged rock, the Mothman stood, its massive wings folded behind it, its red eyes glowing against the darkening sky. The creature stared at the city below, silent and unmoving, as if waiting for something to unfold. John's stomach twisted. This wasn't the end of a cycle, it was the beginning of a new one. He approached slowly, his legs heavy with dread. The closer he got to the Mothman, the more oppressive the air became. There was a weight here, something ancient and powerful that pressed down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The Mothman didn't move, didn't acknowledge him. It simply watched. John stopped a few feet away, his voice trembling. Is this another one? Another ending? The wind carried his words away, but the Mothman remained silent, its gaze fixed on the city below. John swallowed hard. He knew the answer. He didn't need the creature to speak it. He could feel it in his bones, in the very air around him. This was the start of another collapse, another tragedy waiting to unfold. And just like before, just like every time before, he was powerless to stop it. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet. John's heart leaped into his throat as the cliffside began to shift. Rocks crumbled, tumbling down into the abyss below, and the city far below shuddered, as if in response to the tremors. He stumbled backward, watching in horror as the earth itself seemed to convulse. A low rumble echoed through the air, growing louder, more violent. The sky darkened further, the clouds swirling with unnatural speed. The city below began to move, the buildings swaying, the streets cracking. John's breath came in ragged gasps. He knew what was coming. The disaster. Just as in every other cycle, the collapse was inevitable. John turned back to the Mothman, desperation clawing at him. Why? Why shown if I can't stop it? Why keep me here just to watch? The Mothman's wings twitched, a subtle shift that sent a ripple through the air. For the first time, its glowing red eyes turned toward him, locking onto his with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. Because you are part of the story, the voice echoed in his mind, cold and unfeeling. You are not here to stop. You are here to witness, to understand. John recoiled, shaking his head. Understand what? That everything ends. That no matter what I do, people will die. That I can't save anyone. The rumbling grew louder, and below, the first building collapsed in on itself, crumbling like dust. Screams echoed up from the city, distant and hollow, but John couldn't tear his eyes away from the creature in front of him. The Mothman's voice filled his mind once more. You were not chosen to save. You were chosen to see. To know that in every ending there is a beginning. This is the cycle. The words echoed in John's head, but they brought no comfort, no revelation. It was the same twisted truth he had been forced to accept over and over again. He was condemned to this fate, doomed to watch the collapse of worlds, trapped in an endless loop of destruction and rebirth. As the city below continued to fall apart, John felt a bitter anger welling up inside him. He had been chosen for this, bound to it by forces he could never hope to understand. But why? Why him? Why couldn't he just be free? His fists clenched, and he took a step closer to the Mothman, his voice rising above the chaos. What if I refuse? What if I refuse to watch? The Mothman's eyes flickered, and the creature unfurled its wings, towering over him. You cannot refuse what is inevitable. You are bound to this as I am. You will witness, and you will remember. The sky cracked open with a deafening roar, and the city below was consumed by a wall of fire. John's heart pounded in his chest as the flames rose higher, engulfing everything in their path. The screams were unbearable now, filling the air with a chorus of agony. And yet, despite the horror, despite the chaos, John couldn't look away. He was part of this. He had been chosen to watch, to know, to bear witness to the end, again and again, no matter how much he wanted to fight it. The cycle would never break. The Mothman turned back to the destruction below, its wings spread wide as if embracing the inevitable. And John, despite his anger, despite his sorrow, did the only thing he could. He watched, and as the world crumbled around him, as the fires consumed everything, John understood the terrible truth. The Mothman wasn't just a harbinger of doom. It was a reflection of something far deeper, far older than the end of a single world. It was the eternal witness to the cycle of life and death, the end and the beginning. And now, so was he. Forever. The world burned. John stood on the edge of the crumbling cliff, his gaze locked on the chaos below as flames tore through the city, swallowing everything in their path. The ground shuddered beneath him, threatening to collapse, but he didn't move. He couldn't. The Mothman's presence weighed heavily on his mind, its dark wings stretched wide as it loomed over the destruction like an ancient sentinel. The screams, the smoke, the relentless roar of the world unraveling, it was all too familiar. But there was no fear in John now, only a deep, hollow acceptance. The Mothman had spoken the truth. He wasn't here to stop anything. He was here to witness, to be a part of the cycle, to watch everything fall apart only to be rebuilt again. This was his curse, his burden. But deep inside him, something still rebelled against it. There had to be more. There had to be something beyond this endless loop of endings. As the last of the city disappeared beneath a wave of flame and rubble, John's thoughts turned inward to the countless cycles he had endured, each one more terrible than the last. The faces of the people he had seen, the lives lost, the destruction he could never prevent. It all bled together like fragments of a forgotten dream. He had watched it all so many times that he had lost count, each world collapsing into another, each disaster leading to the next. But now, as he stood beside the Mothman on this cliff of oblivion, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more. Something the creature wasn't telling him. The cycle wasn't just about destruction. The Mothman had said there was a beginning in every end, but what was that beginning? What came after the collapse? What was he not seeing? John turned to the Mothman, its glowing red eyes fixed on the smoldering ruins below. He felt the same cold detachment radiating from it, the same indifferent power that had been with him since the first night he saw it. "Why me?" John asked, his voice a whisper carried away by the wind. "Why am I the one who has to watch all of this?" The Mothman didn't move, didn't respond at first. The air around them grew heavier, the sky darkening further as if the universe itself was holding its breath. And then, finally, the creature spoke, its voice echoing in John's mind like the tolling of a distant bell. "Because you are the witness, and the witness must always remember." John's frustration surged, and he stepped forward, closer to the creature, daring to meet its gaze. "Remember what? Every time it ends, it begins again. But what am I supposed to understand from this? What's the point of seeing it all fall apart if I can never change it?" The Mothman turned its eyes toward him, the glowing red orbs boring into his soul. "You misunderstand. It is not about change. It is about understanding the cycle." John's breath hitched. The cycle. He had heard those words before, over and over, but they had always sounded like a cruel joke, a meaningless trap designed to keep him locked in this nightmare. But now, standing in the ashes of yet another ruined world, the words took on a new meaning. "What happens after the end?" John asked, his voice shaking. "You've shown me the destruction, the collapse, the suffering. But what comes next? What's beyond this? The Mothman's wings shifted, the massive dark appendages stretching out farther as the ground trembled beneath them. The creature tilted its head slightly, as if considering John's question for the first time. After the end, there is silence. John's heart sank. Silence. An empty, hollow word that held no answers, no revelations. He had been hoping for something more, some grand explanation, some hidden truth that would make sense of all the suffering, all the destruction. But there was nothing, just silence. No, John said, his voice firmer now, stronger. There's more than that. You wouldn't be here if there wasn't more. You wouldn't show me all of this if there wasn't something to find. There has to be something after the silence. The Mothman's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, John felt a shift in the creature's presence. It wasn't anger or frustration, but something deeper, something darker. The creature's wings folded in slowly, its gaze never leaving John. The silence is the space between. John's mind raced, the words echoing in his thoughts. The space between. Was that where he was now? This strange, liminal realm where he stood on the edge of destruction, always just outside the reach of the collapse. The silence wasn't the end. It was the void between endings, the place where everything paused before it began again. And what if I don't want to be part of it anymore? John asked, his voice rising with a mix of defiance and desperation. What if I want out? What if I don't want to witness this anymore? The Mothman's gaze grew colder, more distant. You cannot escape the cycle. You are bound to it as I am. To witness is to understand the nature of existence. John shook his head, backing away from the creature. No, I won't accept that. There has to be a way out. There has to be a way to end this, to break the cycle for good. The Mothman didn't move, its eyes glowing brighter now, a deep crimson light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the earth itself. The cycle is eternal. It cannot be broken. To try is to deny the very fabric of what is. John felt the ground shift beneath his feet, the tremors growing stronger as the last remnants of the city below crumbled into nothingness. The air crackled with energy, the sky splitting open with a blinding flash of light. He could feel the end coming again, the inevitable collapse that would reset everything. But this time, something inside him resisted. He wouldn't let it happen. Not again, not without a fight. I don't care, John said through gritted teeth, his fists clenched. I won't keep watching. I'll find a way out, no matter what it takes. The Mothman's wings unfurled once more, casting a dark shadow over the cliff. Its voice boomed in John's mind, louder, more powerful than ever before. Then you will be consumed by it. The end will claim you as it claims all things. John took one last look at the creature, its towering form silhouetted against the stormy sky, and then, with a burst of defiance, he turned and ran. He ran toward the edge of the cliff, toward the abyss, toward the unknown. He didn't know where he was going, or what waited for him on the other side, but he couldn't stay here. He couldn't be trapped in this cycle forever. Behind him, the world began to tear apart, the cliff crumbling, the sky collapsing into itself. The Mothman's presence loomed larger and larger, its red eyes burning into his back, but John kept running, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind focused on one singular thought: escape. As he reached the edge of the cliff, the ground gave way beneath him, and for a moment he was weightless, falling into the void. The wind roared in his ears, the world spinning around him as he plunged deeper into the darkness. But this time he wasn't afraid, because this time he chose to fall. And in that final fleeting moment, as the void swallowed him whole, John understood what the Mothman had been trying to show him all along. The cycle couldn't be broken. But maybe, just maybe, it could be escaped. As the darkness closed in, he reached for that thought, clinging to it like a lifeline as the silence finally took him. And somewhere, in the farthest reaches of the void, the Mothman watched, its red eyes glowing in the eternal night. But this time, it watched with something new in its gaze: curiosity. John plunged into the void, his body weightless, his mind spinning as the abyss swallowed him. The sensation of falling stretched on endlessly, but this time it was different. He had made a choice not to remain in the eternal loop, to fight back against the cycle. And for the first time, as he fell through the emptiness, he felt something that had been absent for so long: hope. The void was thick with darkness, a suffocating emptiness that pressed in on all sides. But somewhere deep within, John knew that this was the space between, the place where time and existence unraveled, where the cycle reset itself. He had been here before, in different forms, in different moments, always swept along by the current of fate. But now he was falling through it with intention. He wasn't waiting to be pulled into the next disaster, to be thrust back into another world destined for collapse. He had chosen to fall, chosen to find a way out. The darkness around him rippled, strange flashes of light flickering in the corners of his vision, like distant stars winking out in the far reaches of space. His body felt numb, like he was drifting in a cold, endless sea. But his mind remained sharp, focused on one question. Could he escape the cycle? Time stretched on, or perhaps it didn't exist at all here. John wasn't sure. He had no sense of how long he had been falling, but eventually something shifted. The weightless sensation began to change, and he could feel gravity pulling at him again. The darkness was thinning, giving way to something brighter, more tangible. The void around him churned, as though resisting his presence, but he kept falling, deeper and deeper, until light. Blinding, brilliant light burst around him, and John slammed into solid ground, the impact jarring him back into his body. He gasped, sucking in air, his chest heaving as he struggled to regain his bearings. The light was too bright, overwhelming his senses, and he raised a hand to shield his eyes. Slowly, the light dimmed and John blinked, his vision adjusting to his surroundings. He was no longer in the void, no longer in that in-between place of endless nothingness. Instead, he found himself standing in an open field, surrounded by tall, swaying grass that glowed with an ethereal light. The sky above was a deep shade of blue, dotted with soft, shimmering stars. A gentle breeze brushed against his skin, and the air smelled sweet, like rain on fresh earth. John's heart pounded in his chest as he looked around, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It felt real, more real than anything he had experienced in the endless loops of destruction, but there was something strange about this place, something otherworldly. He took a hesitant step forward, his feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. The ground felt solid beneath him, but there was an energy in the air, a hum of life that vibrated through his bones. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before. Where am I?" John whispered, his voice barely audible in the stillness. There was no answer, but the world around him seemed to pulse in response, as though it were alive, as though it were aware of his presence. He looked up at the sky, half expecting to see the Mothman's glowing red eyes staring down at him, but there was nothing, just the stars twinkling softly above. For a moment, John allowed himself to hope that he had escaped, that he had broken free from the cycle and found his way into something new, something untouched by the endless repetition of endings. But deep down, he knew it couldn't be that simple. And then, as if in answer to his thoughts, the air around him grew colder. John froze. The grass at his feet rustled as the wind picked up, and the once gentle breeze became sharp, biting. The sky darkened, the stars dimming, and a shadow passed over the land. His heart sank as he turned, knowing what he would see. On the horizon, silhouetted against the fading light, stood the Mothman. Its wings were spread wide, its towering form casting a long shadow across the field. The red glow of its eyes cut through the darkness, piercing and cold, locking onto John from a distance. John's breath hitched and his mind raced. How had it followed him? How was it here, in this place that felt so far removed from the cycles of destruction? He had fallen into the void, escaped the loop, so why was the Mothman still here? The creature remained still, its wings barely shifting in the wind, its gaze fixed on John as if waiting, as if watching to see what he would do next. A surge of anger rose in John's chest. He had fought so hard to break free, to escape the endless torment of witnessing the end over and over again. He had thrown himself into the abyss, risking everything to find a way out, and yet here it was, the same unfeeling, unmoving harbinger of doom. "No," John whispered, shaking his head. "Not again." The Mothman didn't move, didn't react. Its presence alone was enough to suffocate the hope that had briefly flared in John's chest. He could feel the weight of its gaze pressing down on him, the same oppressive force that had haunted him for what felt like lifetimes. But something inside him refused to surrender. John clenched his fists, his teeth grinding together. "You won't take this from me," he muttered, his voice growing louder, stronger. "I won't go back." The wind howled around him, the sky darkening further as the Mothman's presence seemed to grow. The creature's eyes burned brighter, their crimson glow reflecting off the grass at John's feet. The field, once calm and serene, was now a battleground, the air charged with tension, with the unspoken knowledge that this was a pivotal moment. John took a step forward, his jaw set with determination. I've seen enough. I've watched the end over and over. I'm done with it. For the first time, the Mothman moved. Its wings shifted, a slow, deliberate motion, and the ground beneath John trembled. The creature's eyes flickered, the light within them pulsing like a heartbeat. You cannot escape what you are. The voice echoed in John's mind, filling him with a cold certainty. The Mothman's gaze bore into him, its presence overwhelming, like the weight of the universe itself. But this time, John refused to back down. No, he said, his voice steady. I'm not just a witness, not anymore. The Mothman's eyes flared, and the world around them seemed to shudder in response. The sky cracked with lightning, and the ground rippled beneath John's feet, but he stood firm, staring the creature down. You showed me the end, over and over, but now I know the cycle only repeats because we let it. The Mothman tilted its head slightly, as if considering John's words. The wind howled louder, the darkness pressing in, but John didn't falter. He had made his choice. I'm not letting it happen again, John said, his voice rising above the storm. I'm not going to stand by and watch anymore. I'm going to change it. The Mothman's wings unfurled, a massive shadowy expanse that blotted out the sky. Its red eyes blazed with intensity, and the air crackled with power. John felt the ground tremble beneath him, the weight of the creature's presence almost unbearable. But in that moment, as the storm raged around them, John realized something. The Mothman wasn't just a harbinger of destruction. It was a test. It was the force that revealed the end, but it was also the force that offered the possibility of change for those who dared to defy it. With a final surge of resolve, John took another step forward, staring into the Mothman's burning eyes. I'm not afraid anymore. And in that instant, something shifted. The world trembled, the sky split with blinding light, and John felt the ground give way beneath him once more. But this time, it wasn't a fall into darkness. It was a leap into the unknown. The cycle was breaking, and John was ready to face whatever came next. True stories of the Appalachian Mountains, mysteries and legends that haunt the hills. The Appalachian Mountains, with their rolling green hills, dense forests, and mist-covered peaks, are not just a stunning natural wonder, but also a place steeped in mystery and legend. These mountains have been home to countless generations of people, each contributing their own stories to the rich tapestry of Appalachian folklore. Here are some true stories that have been passed down through the years, tales of strange occurrences and unexplained events that continue to haunt the region. The ghost of Greenbrier County. In the late 19th century, the quiet town of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, was shaken by a chilling event that would forever be etched into local legend. Zona Heaster Shue, a young woman who had recently married, was found dead in her home. Her death was initially ruled as natural, but her mother, Mary Jane Heaster, believed otherwise. She claimed that Zona's ghost visited her in the night, revealing that she had been murdered by her husband, Edward Shue. The ghostly visitations were so vivid and detailed that Mary Jane convinced local authorities to reopen the case. An exhumation and autopsy revealed that Zona's neck had been broken. Edward Shue was arrested, tried, and convicted of her murder. To this day, locals speak of Zona's ghost, who continues to wander the hills, seeking justice for wronged souls. The Brown Mountain Lights. The Brown Mountain Lights of North Carolina are one of the most enduring mysteries of the Appalachian Mountains. These eerie, glowing orbs have been spotted floating above the Brown Mountain for centuries, with no definitive explanation. The lights have been seen in various colors, from white to red to blue, and appear in different shapes and sizes. Local Cherokee legends tell of spirits of Native American warriors who died in a great battle long ago, their souls still lingering on the mountain. Scientists have attempted to explain the phenomenon as swamp gas, reflections of car headlights, or even ball lightning, but no theory has ever fully explained the lights. Despite modern efforts to uncover the truth, the Brown Mountain Lights remain an unsolved mystery, captivating the imagination of all who witness them. The Bell Witch of Tennessee. Though technically outside the Appalachian region, the story of the Bell Witch has become a part of the folklore that permeates the entire Appalachian area. In the early 19th century, the Bell family of Adams, Tennessee, was plagued by a malevolent spirit that became known as the Bell Witch. The witch terrorized the family for years, manifesting as a disembodied voice, poltergeist activity, and even physical attacks. The spirit's focus was on John Bell, the family patriarch, whom it claimed it would kill. True to its word, John Bell died under mysterious circumstances, with the spirit taking credit for his demise. The Bell Witch story has been retold countless times, becoming one of America's most famous ghost stories and a chilling reminder of the supernatural forces that some believe still roam the Appalachian Hills. The Lost Colony of Roanoke. One of the most enduring mysteries of American history is the disappearance of the Roanoke colony, the first English settlement in the New World. While the colony itself was located on the coast of present-day North Carolina, many believe that the survivors of the lost colony fled inland to the Appalachian Mountains. According to local legend, the colonists intermingled with the Native American tribes, leaving behind clues in the form of strange carvings and eerie tales of pale-skinned people living in the woods. Some historians have speculated that the lost colonists became part of the Lumbee tribe, whose members still live in North Carolina today. The mystery of what happened to the Roanoke settlers remains unsolved, but the idea that they found refuge in the Appalachian Mountains continues to intrigue and inspire stories of hidden settlements and lost civilizations within the region's dense forests. The Mothman of Point Pleasant. Though not within the Appalachian Mountains proper, the story of the Mothman has become an integral part of Appalachian folklore. In the late 1960s, the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was thrust into the spotlight when residents began reporting sightings of a strange, winged creature with glowing red eyes. Dubbed the Mothman, this entity was seen by dozens of people over the course of a year, often appearing near the Silver Bridge, which spanned the Ohio River. In December 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed, killing 46 people. Many believe the Mothman was a harbinger of the disaster, a supernatural being warning of impending doom. The legend of the Mothman has since been immortalized in books, movies, and even a museum in Point Pleasant, but the true nature of the creature remains a mystery. The Witch of Ridge Hollow. In the remote town of Ridge Hollow, Virginia, lived a woman named Elizabeth Lowe, who was reputed to be a witch. According to legend, Elizabeth could control the weather, curse crops, and even bring misfortune to those who crossed her. When she mysteriously vanished one winter, the townsfolk believed she had cast one final spell. Her cabin was found empty, yet the ground around it remained warm, even in the dead of winter. To this day, people avoid the hollow, believing that Elizabeth's spirit still lingers, waiting to exact revenge on those who disturbed her. The Phantom Train of Clinch Mountain. Railroad workers and locals alike have reported seeing a ghostly train running along the old tracks on Clinch Mountain in Tennessee. This train, with its bright headlight and echoing whistle, appears out of nowhere and vanishes just as suddenly. Legend has it that the train is the spirit of an engine that derailed during a storm, killing everyone on board. The Phantom Train is said to be searching for its final destination, doomed to travel the tracks for eternity. The legend of Swift's silver mine. The tale of Swift's silver mine is one of the most famous legends in the Appalachian Mountains. John Swift, an 18th-century explorer, claimed to have discovered a rich silver mine in the mountains, but he kept its location secret. He recorded the details in a journal and minted silver coins as proof, but he was never able to retrieve the silver before he died. Treasure hunters have searched for the mine for over 2 centuries, but it remains undiscovered. The legend persists, with some believing that Swift's ghost guards the treasure, ensuring it is never found. The haunting of the Greenbrier Ghost House. In Greenbrier County, West Virginia, a house known as the Greenbrier Ghost House is said to be haunted by multiple spirits. The house, abandoned for decades, was the site of numerous deaths, including that of a young bride who was murdered on her wedding day. Visitors have reported hearing screams, footsteps, and even seeing the ghostly figure of the bride wandering the halls. The house has become a local legend, with many claiming it is one of the most haunted places in the Appalachian region. The Banshee of the Blue Ridge. The Banshee of the Blue Ridge is a terrifying figure in Appalachian folklore. According to legend, this ghostly woman, dressed in white, appears before the death of a family member. Her mournful wails can be heard echoing through the Blue Ridge Mountains, and those who hear her cry know that tragedy is near. The Banshee is believed to be the spirit of a woman who died tragically in the mountains, forever doomed to warn others of impending doom. The Melungeons of the Appalachians. The Melungeons are a mysterious group of people living in the Appalachian region, particularly in Tennessee and Virginia. Their origins are shrouded in mystery, with theories ranging from them being descendants of lost Spanish explorers to being remnants of the lost colony of Roanoke. The Melungeons have their own distinct culture and physical characteristics, often described as having darker skin and European features. Despite centuries of speculation, the true origins of the Melungeons remain one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Appalachian Mountains. The Devil's Stomping Ground. In a remote area of North Carolina lies a circular patch of barren ground where nothing grows, known as the Devil's Stomping Ground. Local legend says that this spot is where the devil himself comes to walk in circles, plotting his next evil deed. Despite attempts to cultivate the land, nothing will grow there, and items left in the circle overnight are found moved or destroyed by morning. The mystery of the Devil's Stomping Ground has puzzled residents and visitors for generations, and many avoid the area, fearing its dark reputation. The Cherokee Little People. The Cherokee people have long told stories of the Little People, a race of small, magical beings who live in the Appalachian Mountains. These beings are said to be about knee-high, with the ability to turn invisible or shapeshift. They are known to be mischievous but generally kind, helping those in need or punishing those who are disrespectful to nature. Many Cherokee believe the Little People are still present in the mountains, watching over the land and its inhabitants. The Ghost of the Appalachian Trail. Hikers along the Appalachian Trail have reported encounters with a ghostly figure known as the Gray Man. This spectral hiker, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, is said to appear during times of danger, warning hikers of impending storms or other hazards. Those who heed his warning are said to be spared from harm, while those who ignore him often find themselves in trouble. The Grey Man's true identity is unknown, but his presence on the trail has been noted by hikers for decades. The Moon-Eyed People. The Moon-Eyed People are a legendary race that have inhabited the Appalachian region before the arrival of the Cherokee. According to legend, these people had pale skin, large blue eyes, and could only see in the dark, making them nocturnal. They were eventually driven out by the Cherokee, who feared their strange abilities. Some believe the Moon-Eyed People retreated into caves deep in the mountains, where they remain to this day. The mystery of the Moon-Eyed People adds another layer to the rich tapestry of Appalachian folklore. The ghostly miners of Harlan County. Harlan County, Kentucky, is home to numerous abandoned coal mines, some of which are said to be haunted by the spirits of miners who lost their lives in tragic accidents. These ghostly miners are often seen carrying lanterns, their figures barely visible in the dim light. Locals believe that the spirits are still trying to finish their work or seeking justice for their untimely deaths. The haunting presence of these miners serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers faced by those who toiled in the mines. The Wampus Cat. The Wampus Cat is a fearsome creature from Appalachian folklore said to be a half-woman, half-cat being that prowls the mountains at night. According to legend, the Wampus Cat was once a woman who was cursed for spying on a sacred Cherokee ritual. She was transformed into a creature with the body of a cat and the mind of a human, doomed to roam the forests forever. The Wampus Cat is often blamed for strange noises, missing livestock, and other unexplained occurrences in the mountains. The Tale of Spearfinger. Spearfinger is a legendary figure in Cherokee mythology, a terrifying witch with a stone-covered body and a sharp obsidian finger. She was known for her ability to shape-shift and for luring children away from their homes, where she would devour their livers. Spearfinger was eventually defeated by the Cherokee, but her legend lives on. Some believe that her spirit still haunts the Appalachian Mountains, particularly in the areas once inhabited by the Cherokee. The Green Eyes of Chickamauga. During the Battle of Chickamauga in the Civil War, many soldiers reported seeing a pair of glowing green eyes in the darkness. After the battle, stories spread of a ghostly figure with green eyes who roamed the battlefield at night. This figure is believed to be the spirit of a soldier who died in the battle, unable to find peace. The Green Eyes of Chickamauga have become a well-known ghost story in the Appalachian region, with many claiming to have seen the eerie lights themselves. The Snallygaster. The Snallygaster is a legendary creature said to inhabit the Appalachian Mountains, particularly in Maryland. Described as a dragon-like beast with a metallic beak, sharp talons, and wings, the Snallygaster is said to swoop down from the skies to carry off livestock and even unsuspecting humans. The creature was reportedly sighted multiple times in the 18th and 19th centuries, and although no physical evidence has been found, the legend persists. Some believe the Snallygaster is a guardian of the mountains, while others see it as a harbinger of doom. The legend of the cursed Cherokee gold. During the 1830s, the Cherokee people were forcibly removed from their lands in what is now known as the Trail of Tears. Before they left, it is said that they hid their gold in the Appalachian Mountains, cursing it so that anyone who tried to steal it would meet a terrible fate. Many treasure hunters have searched for the cursed gold, but those who claim to have found it often suffer mysterious accidents or disappear without a trace. The cursed Cherokee gold remains one of the most sought-after and feared treasures in the Appalachian region. The Gurdon Light. The Gurdon Light is an unexplained phenomenon near the small town of Gurdon, Arkansas, on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. The light appears along an old railroad track and is said to be the ghost of a railroad worker who was decapitated in an accident. The light is often seen floating in the air, moving along the tracks as if searching for something. Despite scientific investigations, the source of the Gurdon Light remains a mystery, and it continues to draw curious visitors to the area. The Haunted Hills of the Catawba River. The Catawba River, which runs through the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, is surrounded by hills that are said to be haunted by the spirits of those who died in the river. Fishermen and hikers have reported seeing ghostly figures along the riverbanks, hearing cries for help, and feeling sudden drops in temperature. The river has a dark history with numerous drownings and accidents, leading many to believe that the hills are cursed. The haunted hills of the Catawba River remain a place of mystery and fear for those who venture too close. The story of the Silver Run Tunnel. In West Virginia, the Silver Run Tunnel is known for its eerie and ghostly occurrences. The tunnel, once part of a bustling railroad, is now abandoned, but it is said to be haunted by the spirit of a young woman. According to legend, she was a bride-to-be who was murdered in the tunnel, and her ghost has been seen wandering the area in a white dress. Train conductors and workers have reported seeing her apparition, leading to the belief that the tunnel is cursed. The Silver Run Tunnel remains a popular spot for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. The Curse of the Bell Witch Cave. The Bell Witch Cave, located in Adams, Tennessee, is part of the infamous Bell Witch legend. The cave is said to be the home of the witch's spirit, and those who enter it are often met with strange occurrences. Visitors have reported feeling an unseen force pushing them, hearing whispers, and even seeing shadowy figures. The cave is considered one of the most haunted places in the Appalachian region, and the Curse of the Bell Witch continues to draw curious visitors from all over the world. The Phantom Lights of Brown Mountain. Nestled deep within the Blue Ridge Mountains, Brown Mountain is known for a mystery that has baffled locals and scientists alike for centuries. The ghostly lights that flicker in the night sky. These unexplained orbs of light, known as the Brown Mountain Lights, have been reported since the early 1900s, with some accounts dating back to the Cherokee and Catawba tribes. Witnesses described the lights as glowing orbs, varying in size and color, that move erratically across the ridge, disappearing and reappearing without warning. Many have speculated about the origins of these lights. Some believe they are the spirits of Native American maidens searching for their lost warriors. Others think they are the ghosts of slaves who perished in the mountains while attempting to escape to freedom. Skeptics have offered more grounded explanations, such as swamp gas or reflections of car headlights, but none of these theories have been able to fully explain the phenomenon. One particularly eerie encounter occurred in the fall of 1969 when a group of hikers camped near the mountain to observe the lights. As night fell, they watched in awe as the lights appeared, dancing across the ridge. But their wonder quickly turned to terror when one of the lights broke away from the others and began to drift toward their campsite. The light hovered just above them, pulsating with an eerie glow before suddenly vanishing into thin air. The hikers, shaken by the experience, packed up and left the mountain that very night, vowing never to return. The Wraith of Roan Mountain. Roan Mountain, straddling the border between North Carolina and Tennessee, is renowned for its breathtaking views and the expansive rhododendron gardens that bloom each spring. However, this serene beauty hides a darker legend, the tale of the Wraith of Roan Mountain. In the 1800s, a young woman named Eleanor was said to have lived in a small cabin on the mountain with her father. They were reclusive, keeping to themselves and rarely interacting with the other mountain folk. Eleanor was known for her striking beauty, but she was also rumored to possess a strange power. She could predict the deaths of those around her. The legend tells that one bitter winter, Eleanor fell in love with a young man from a nearby village. Their love was doomed from the start, as Eleanor had foreseen his death in her dreams. Despite her warnings, the man insisted on marrying her, dismissing her visions as mere superstition. On the night before their wedding, a blizzard swept through the mountains, and Eleanor's fiancé set out to visit her one last time before the ceremony. He never arrived. The next morning, his frozen body was found at the foot of the mountain. Heartbroken and filled with guilt, Eleanor retreated further into isolation, her mind unraveling with each passing day. She died alone in her cabin, and her body was found months later, surrounded by eerie symbols carved into the walls. Since then, hikers and campers have reported seeing a ghostly figure wandering the mountain, her face pale and her eyes filled with sorrow. Those who have encountered her say she appears just before a storm, her presence a harbinger of doom. Locals believe that Eleanor's spirit still roams Roan Mountain, forever searching for the lover she lost to the icy grip of death. The lost Confederate gold of Lake Fontana. Lake Fontana, with its deep, clear waters and lush surrounding forests, is a popular spot for fishing and boating in the Appalachian Mountains. But beneath its calm surface lies a tale of greed, betrayal, and a fortune in gold that has never been found. The story begins at the end of the Civil War, as the Confederacy was collapsing. Legend has it that a group of Confederate soldiers, desperate to prevent their treasury from falling into Union hands, loaded several crates of gold onto wagons and fled into the mountains. Their plan was to bury the gold in a remote location and return for it once the war was over. The soldiers made it to the area now covered by Lake Fontana, but the journey was treacherous and tensions ran high. The men argued over what to do with the gold, with some wanting to keep it for themselves rather than return it to the Confederate government. The disagreement turned violent, and a deadly skirmish ensued. In the end, only one soldier survived, badly wounded but determined to hide the gold before he succumbed to his injuries. He buried the treasure somewhere in the forest, marking the spot with a cryptic symbol carved into a nearby tree. The soldier died shortly after, taking the exact location of the gold to his grave. When the lake was created in the 1940s, the area where the treasure was believed to be buried was submerged underwater, adding another layer of difficulty to its discovery. To this day, treasure hunters scour the area around Lake Fontana, hoping to decipher the clues and uncover the lost Confederate gold. Some have reported finding strange markings on trees or hearing whispers in the wind as they search, but the treasure remains elusive, its location hidden by time and the ever-changing landscape of the mountains. The haunting of the Greenbrier Ghost. The Greenbrier Ghost, a well-known tale from the Appalachian region, is a story of love, betrayal, and justice from beyond the grave. It takes place in the small town of Greenbrier, West Virginia, in the late 19th century. Zona Hester Shue, a young woman with a bright future, married a blacksmith named Edward Shue. The marriage, however, was far from happy. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester, distrusted Edward from the start, feeling that something was not right about him. Tragically, Zona was found dead in her home under mysterious circumstances just a few months after the wedding. Edward claimed that Zona had died of a heart attack, and the local doctor, who was also the coroner, accepted this explanation without conducting a thorough examination. Zona was quickly buried, and Edward seemed eager to put the whole affair behind him. But Mary Jane was not convinced. She believed that her daughter had been murdered and prayed fervently for a sign to prove it. Her prayers were answered in the form of a series of vivid dreams in which Zona's ghost appeared, revealing that Edward had killed her in a fit of rage. Zona's spirit described how Edward had crushed her windpipe, breaking her neck, and then staged her body to make it look like she had died naturally. Mary Jane took her story to the local prosecutor, who, though skeptical, agreed to exhume Zona's body for a proper autopsy. The examination confirmed the ghost's claims. Zona's neck was indeed broken, and her windpipe was crushed. Edward Shue was arrested and put on trial for murder. During the trial, Mary Jane testified about the ghostly visits, and remarkably, the jury found her story convincing. Edward was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The Greenbrier Ghost remains one of the only cases in U.S. legal history where the testimony of a ghost played a key role in securing a conviction. These are just a few of the countless eerie and fascinating tales that have emerged from the Appalachian Mountains. The region's dense forests, winding trails, and remote settlements provide the perfect backdrop for stories of the supernatural, many of which continue to be passed down through generations, adding to the rich tapestry of Appalachian folklore. The mysterious disappearance of Dennis Martin. In 1969, a summer family outing turned into one of the most baffling mysteries of the Appalachian Mountains. The Martin family, from Knoxville, Tennessee, was spending Father's Day weekend in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. They chose to camp at Spence Field, a popular area on the Appalachian Trail near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. 6-year-old Dennis Martin was playing with his brother and other children near the campsite when he decided to play a prank. He planned to hide in the bushes and jump out to surprise the adults. However, when his family called for him, Dennis didn't respond. Thinking he had wandered off, the family began searching for him, but there was no sign of the boy. Panic set in, and a massive search operation was launched, involving park rangers, the National Guard, and even the FBI. Despite the extensive efforts, which included combing through miles of rugged terrain, no trace of Dennis was ever found. Theories about his disappearance range from a tragic accident, where he could have fallen into a ravine, to more sinister explanations, including abduction by an unknown person or even wild animals. One of the most chilling aspects of the case is that on the same afternoon, Dennis disappeared. A family hiking several miles away reported hearing a child scream and seeing a figure darting through the woods. They described the figure as a rough-looking man carrying something on his shoulder, but the connection to Dennis was never confirmed. The disappearance of Dennis Martin remains unsolved, leaving behind a haunting legacy that still lingers in the minds of those who venture into the Smoky Mountains. The Ghost Dog of the Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail, a legendary hiking route that stretches over 2,000 miles from Georgia to Maine, is filled with stories of strange encounters and unexplained phenomena. Among these tales is the legend of the Ghost Dog, a spectral canine that is said to appear to hikers in need of help. According to the story, the Ghost Dog was once a loyal companion to a solitary hiker who had dedicated his life to exploring the Appalachian Trail. The two were inseparable, sharing every moment of the long journey together. But one winter, the hiker fell ill, and despite his dog's attempts to keep him warm and alert other hikers, he died alone on the trail. Heartbroken, the dog is said to have refused to leave his master's side, remaining by his body until it too succumbed to the cold. But the bond between the hiker and his dog was so strong that it transcended death. Hikers have reported seeing the Ghost Dog on foggy mornings or during storms, usually when they are lost or in danger. The dog is described as a large, white shepherd with glowing eyes and an ethereal glow surrounding it. It never makes a sound, but those who have encountered it say they felt a sense of calm and reassurance in its presence. The dog is known to lead lost hikers back to the trail or to a place of safety before disappearing into the mist. Though skeptics dismiss the Ghost Dog as a myth or a trick of the light, many hikers believe in the tale, finding comfort in the idea that a guardian spirit watches over those who traverse the treacherous paths of the Appalachian Trail. The Curse of the Bell Witch Cave. While the Bell Witch is most famously associated with Adams, Tennessee, her legend has crept into the Appalachian Mountains, particularly around the Bell Witch Cave, a limestone cave on the former Bell family property. The Bell Witch is said to be the spirit of a woman named Kate Batts, who was wronged by John Bell, a farmer who lived near the Red River. The legend states that after John Bell and his family tormented Kate Batts in life, she returned in death to haunt them. The Bell Witch's spirit tormented the Bell family for years, causing physical harm, strange noises, and inexplicable events that ultimately led to John Bell's death. The spirit, however, did not rest after John's demise. Instead, it found a new home in the cave on the Bell property. Visitors to the Bell Witch Cave have reported a range of paranormal activities, from eerie voices and cold spots to the feeling of being watched by an unseen presence. Some have even claimed to see shadowy figures or ghostly apparitions lurking in the cave's depths. The cave is now a popular tourist attraction, but it comes with a warning. Many who enter the cave report experiencing misfortune afterward. The curse of the Bell Witch is said to extend to those who disturb her resting place, with some visitors reporting accidents, illnesses, and other misfortunes after their visit. Despite the risks, the legend of the Bell Witch continues to draw curious souls to the Appalachian Mountains, each hoping to catch a glimpse of the spirit that has haunted the region for over 2 centuries. The vanishing town of Elkmont, Tennessee, once a thriving logging town in the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains, is now a ghost town with a mysterious past. Established in the early 1900s, Elkmont was home to a bustling community of loggers and their families. As the timber industry flourished, so did the town, which eventually became a popular resort destination for the wealthy. But by the 1930s, the town's fortunes began to decline as the Great Smoky Mountains National Park was established, and the land was purchased by the government. The logging operations ceased, and the residents were forced to leave. The once vibrant community was abandoned, and the town slowly fell into decay. Over the years, Elkmont has become known as one of the most haunted places in the Appalachian Mountains. Visitors to the area report seeing ghostly figures wandering among the dilapidated buildings and hearing the sounds of laughter, music, and conversation as if the town was still alive. Some even claim to have seen the apparition of a train conductor guiding an invisible locomotive through the abandoned tracks. One of the most enduring legends is that of the Appalachian Lady, a ghostly woman dressed in early 20th century clothing who is said to appear on foggy mornings, walking the old roads of Elkmont. Those who have seen her describe her as a sad, lonely figure who seems to be searching for something, or someone lost to time. Despite efforts to restore some of the old buildings, the town of Elkmont remains a shadow of its former self, its eerie atmosphere a testament to the lives and stories that once thrived in this now vanished community. The strange case of the Moon-Eyed People. The Appalachian Mountains are rich with Native American legends, one of the most intriguing being the tale of the Moon-Eyed People. According to Cherokee folklore, the Moon-Eyed People were a race of small, pale-skinned beings who lived in the mountains long before the arrival of the Cherokee. They were called moon-eyed because they were said to be so sensitive to light that they could only see at night. These mysterious beings were described as having blue eyes, fair skin, and a small stature. They lived in underground dwellings and were skilled builders, constructing intricate stone structures that still stand today in some parts of the Appalachian Mountains. The Cherokee believed that the Moon-Eyed People were eventually driven out of the region by the more dominant tribes, retreating deep into the mountains where they vanished from history. Archaeologists and historians have debated the origins of the Moon-Eyed People for years, with some suggesting that they might have been an ancient, pre-Columbian race or even early European explorers who arrived long before Columbus. Others believe the story is purely mythical, a reflection of the Cherokees' encounters with other indigenous groups. One of the most famous sites associated with the Moon-Eyed People is the Judicola Rock in North Carolina, a massive boulder covered in ancient petroglyphs that some believe were created by these enigmatic beings. Whether the Moon-Eyed People were real or a product of legend, their story adds another layer of mystery to the already rich folklore of the Appalachian Mountains. The specter of the Red Widows cabin. Deep in the wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains, near the border of North Carolina and Virginia, lies the ruins of an old cabin known as the Red Widows cabin. The story behind this eerie place dates back to the late 1800s when a woman named Sarah Jane Whittaker lived there with her husband. Sarah Jane was known in the area as the Red Widow because of her striking red hair and the tragic fate of her husbands. She had been married 3 times, and each of her husbands had met a mysterious and untimely death, leading to rumors. One, the legend of Goatman's Bridge. Location: Denton, Texas. Goatman's Bridge, officially known as the Old Alton Bridge, has earned a reputation as one of the most haunted locations in Texas. This historic iron truss bridge, built in 1884, connects the towns of Denton and Copper Canyon. The bridge gained its eerie nickname from a local legend that dates back to the 1930s, involving a successful African-American goat farmer named Oscar Washburn. Washburn was known for his thriving business, which earned him the nickname Goatman. His goats were prized for their quality, and the locals began to trust him for his expertise in goat farming. However, his success and the respect he garnered from the community made him a target of the local Ku Klux Klan. One night, filled with jealousy and hatred, the Klan members decided to take action. They stormed Washburn's home, dragging him out to the Old Alton Bridge. There, they tied a noose around his neck and threw him over the edge. But when they looked down to confirm his death, they were shocked to find that his body had vanished without a trace. In a panic, they searched the area, but no sign of him was ever found. Fearing supernatural retribution, they slaughtered his family and set his home ablaze. Since that tragic night, numerous reports have surfaced of strange and terrifying occurrences on Goatman's Bridge. Visitors claim to have seen glowing red eyes staring at them from the darkness, heard ghostly footsteps following them across the bridge, and even felt the presence of an unseen force trying to push them over the edge. Some have reported encountering the Goatman himself, a towering, shadowy figure with the head of a goat, who is said to appear as a warning to those who dare cross the bridge at night. Local paranormal investigators have documented strange electromagnetic readings, unexplained cold spots, and disembodied voices during their investigations. The bridge has become a popular destination for ghost hunters and thrill seekers alike, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous Goatman. 2. The Servant Girl Annihilator. Location: Austin, Texas. Long before Jack the Ripper terrorized the streets of London, Austin, Texas was the hunting ground for one of America's first serial killers, the Servant Girl Annihilator. This mysterious figure is believed to have been responsible for a series of brutal murders that took place between 1884 and 1885, leaving the city in a state of terror. The killer's first known victim was Molly Smith, an African-American servant who was brutally attacked in her employer's home on December 30, 1884. She was dragged from her bed, bludgeoned with an axe, and stabbed multiple times. The violence of the attack shocked the community, but it was only the beginning of a horrific spree. Over the next year, 7 more women, most of them African-American servants, were brutally murdered in a similar fashion. The killer often dragged the victims from their beds while they slept, attacking them with an axe or knife, and then mutilating their bodies. The brutality of the murders and the seemingly random nature of the attacks left the city in a state of panic. Despite the extensive investigation, which included questioning hundreds of suspects and even calling in detectives from other cities, the identity of the Servant Girl Annihilator remains a mystery to this day. Some historians believe that the killer may have been an early precursor to Jack the Ripper, as the two shared similarities in their methods and choice of victims. The fear and paranoia that gripped Austin during the killer's reign are still remembered today. The Servant Girl Annihilator has become a chilling chapter in the city's history, a reminder of a time when a ruthless predator stalked the streets, leaving a trail of blood and terror in his wake. 3. The Candyman Murders. Location: Houston, Texas. The Candyman murders are among the most horrifying crimes in Texas history, involving the abduction, torture, and murder of at least 28 young boys between 1970 and 1973. The mastermind behind these gruesome acts was Dean Cole, a seemingly ordinary man who worked at his family's candy factory in Houston, earning him the nickname the Candyman. Cole was well liked in his community, often giving out free candy to local children. However, beneath his friendly exterior, Cole was a sadistic predator. He was assisted in his heinous acts by 2 teenage accomplices, David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, who helped him lure victims to his home with promises of parties, drugs, and money. Once the boys were inside Cole's house, they were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Cole would tie them up, sexually assault them, and then kill them, often by strangulation or shooting. He buried their bodies in various locations around Houston, including a boat shed that would later become infamous as a mass grave. The murders continued for 3 years until 1973, when Henley, who had grown increasingly disturbed by Cole's actions, turned on him. One night, during a confrontation, Henley shot and killed Cole in self-defense. After his arrest, Henley led police to the burial sites, where the remains of 28 boys were discovered. The discovery of the Candyman's crimes shocked the nation and left Houston reeling from the sheer scale of the atrocities. The case raised serious questions about how such a prolific serial killer could operate undetected for so long. To this day, the memory of Dean Cole and the Candyman murders casts a long shadow over Houston, a grim reminder of the evil that can lurk behind even the most innocent of facades. 4. The Phantom Killer of Texarkana. Location: Texarkana, Texas. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, as they came to be known, took place in the spring of 1946 and remain one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in Texas history. The killer, often referred to as the Phantom Killer, was responsible for a series of attacks that left 5 people dead and 3 others seriously injured. The crimes inspired the 1976 film The Town That Dreaded Sundown and have become an enduring part of local folklore. The Phantom Killer's reign of terror began on February 22, 1946, when Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend, Mary Jean Larry, were attacked while parked on a secluded road. The assailant, a man wearing a white mask with eye holes cut out, forced them out of the car at gunpoint. He severely beat Hollis and sexually assaulted Larry before fleeing the scene. Both victims survived, but their descriptions of the attacker were vague and no leads emerged. Over the next few months, the Phantom Killer struck again, each time targeting young couples parked in secluded areas. The attacks were brutal, with the victims often being shot multiple times at close range. The killer's ability to strike without leaving any significant clues baffled law enforcement, and the fear in Texarkana grew with each new murder. The local police, along with the Texas Rangers, launched an extensive manhunt, but the Phantom Killer seemed to vanish as mysteriously as he had appeared. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, the case went cold, and the identity of the Phantom Killer remains unknown. The Texarkana Moonlight murders have left a lasting impact on the town, where the events of 1946 are still remembered with a mixture of fear and fascination. Every year, on the anniversary of the attacks, the film The Town That Dreaded Sundown is screened in Texarkana, keeping the memory of the Phantom Killer alive and ensuring that his dark legacy is never forgotten. 5. The Ghosts of the Alamo Location, San Antonio, Texas. The Alamo is one of the most iconic historical sites in Texas, known for the pivotal battle that took place there in 1836 during the Texas Revolution. But beyond its historical significance, the Alamo is also said to be one of the most haunted locations in the state, with numerous reports of ghostly apparitions and eerie phenomena. The Battle of the Alamo was a brutal and bloody conflict in which a small group of Texan defenders, including famous figures like James Bowie and Davy Crockett, fought to the death against a much larger Mexican force led by General Santa Anna. The defenders were ultimately overwhelmed, and nearly all of them were killed. The site of their last stand became hallowed ground, and many believe that the spirits of those who died there continue to linger. Visitors and staff at the Alamo have reported seeing ghostly figures dressed in period clothing, hearing the sounds of distant battle cries, and feeling sudden drops in temperature. Some claim to have seen the ghost of a young boy running through the corridors, while others have encountered the apparition of a tall man believed to be the spirit of a Mexican soldier who was killed during the siege. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the Alamo involves the spirit of a man dressed in black, often seen near the spot where Davy Crockett is believed to have fallen. Witnesses describe him as a tall, shadowy figure with piercing eyes who appears to be mourning the loss of his comrades. In addition to these sightings, there are reports of strange lights flickering in the windows at night, the sound of heavy footsteps echoing through the halls, and the faint smell of gunpowder lingering in the air. The paranormal activity at the Alamo has drawn the attention of ghost hunters and paranormal investigators from around the world, all eager to experience the haunted history of this legendary site. The Alamo stands as a symbol of courage and sacrifice, but it is also a place where the past refuses to rest. The ghosts of the Alamo serve as a reminder of the violent and tragic events that unfolded there, forever etched into the history of Texas. 6. The Hotel Galvez Hauntings. Location: Galveston, Texas. Hotel Galvez, an opulent hotel built in 1911, stands as a landmark on Galveston Island. But beyond its luxurious facade lies a history filled with tragic events, making it one of the most haunted hotels in Texas. One of the most famous spirits said to inhabit the hotel is that of the Lovelorn Lady. According to legend, this young woman checked into the hotel in the 1950s while waiting for her fiancé, a sailor, to return from sea. Each day, she would visit the hotel's upper floors to watch the horizon for any sign of his ship. Tragically, she received news that his ship had been lost at sea, and in her grief, she hanged herself from the rafters of the hotel's west turret. Guests and staff have reported seeing a woman in a white gown wandering the halls, her presence often accompanied by the scent of lavender. Elevators are known to travel to the 5th floor, where her room was located, without anyone pressing the buttons, and strange sounds echo through the halls at night. But the Lovelorn Lady is not the only spirit said to haunt Hotel Galvez. The hotel was built on the site of a Catholic orphanage, destroyed by the Great Storm of 1900. A devastating hurricane that claimed thousands of lives. It is believed that the spirits of the children who perished in the storm also linger in the hotel, with guests reporting the sound of children laughing and playing in the hallways even when no children are present. The hotel's basement, where the laundry facilities are located, is also notorious for paranormal activity. Workers have reported feeling an unseen presence watching them, lights flickering on and off, and objects mysteriously moving on their own. Hotel Galvez's haunted reputation has made it a popular destination for ghost hunters and those curious about the supernatural. Many guests book rooms specifically in hopes of encountering one of the hotel's many spirits, making it a unique blend of luxury and the paranormal. 7. The Marfa Lights. Location: Marfa, Texas. The Marfa Lights are one of Texas's most enduring and mysterious phenomena. These strange, glowing orbs of light have been reported near the town of Marfa in the remote West Texas desert since the late 19th century. The lights, which appear to float and dance in the air, have puzzled scientists, locals, and visitors for generations. The first recorded sighting of the Marfa Lights was in 1883 by a cowboy named Robert Reed Ellison, who was driving cattle through the area. He noticed the strange lights in the distance and assumed they were Apache campfires. However, when he approached the location the next day, there were no signs of campfires or people, just the desolate desert landscape. Since then, countless people have witnessed the Marfa Lights. They usually appear as glowing orbs of various colors, most commonly white, yellow, orange, or red. The lights seem to move erratically, sometimes merging, splitting apart, or darting rapidly across the horizon. Despite numerous studies, there is no definitive explanation for what causes the Marfa Lights. Theories range from reflections of car headlights on distant highways to gases escaping from underground, but none have been conclusively proven. The mystery of the Marfa Lights has made them a popular attraction, drawing visitors from around the world to see the strange phenomenon for themselves. A viewing area has been established just outside of Marfa, where people gather at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive lights. Whether they are a natural phenomenon or something more otherworldly, the Marfa Lights continue to captivate and confound those who witness them. 8. The Black Hope Curse. Location: Crosby, Texas. The Black Hope Curse is a chilling tale of a suburban neighborhood built on cursed land in Crosby, Texas. In the 1980s, residents of Newport, a quiet suburban development, began experiencing a series of inexplicable and terrifying events. It all started when Sam and Judith Haney, who had recently moved into the neighborhood, decided to dig a swimming pool in their backyard. As they dug, they uncovered 2 wooden coffins containing the remains of an African-American couple who had been buried there in the 1930s. Disturbed by the discovery, the Haneys reburied the bodies but soon found themselves plagued by a series of misfortunes. They began experiencing strange noises, flickering lights, and appliances turning on and off by themselves. They even claimed to see ghostly apparitions in their home. The Haneys weren't the only ones affected. Other residents in the neighborhood reported similar disturbances, objects moving on their own cold spots, and a pervasive sense of unease. As the strange occurrences continued, the Haneys and their neighbors began to suspect that their homes were built on an unmarked graveyard and that disturbing the graves had unleashed a curse. Their fears were confirmed when they discovered that the land had once been a cemetery for freed slaves, known as Black Hope Cemetery. In their quest to find answers, the Haneys learned that the graves had never been properly moved when the land was developed, and that many more bodies were likely still buried beneath the neighborhood. The Haneys eventually filed a lawsuit against the developer, but they lost the case, and their situation only grew worse. Judith Haney's health deteriorated, and she passed away, which some attributed to the curse. Unable to cope with the constant disturbances, the Haneys eventually abandoned their home. The Black Hope Curse has since become a part of local legend, a cautionary tale about the consequences of disturbing the dead. To this day, stories of paranormal activity in the Newport neighborhood persist, with residents claiming that the curse still lingers over the land. 9. Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Location: Yorktown, Texas. Yorktown Memorial Hospital, located in the small town of Yorktown, Texas, is known as one of the most haunted places in the state. The hospital was built in 1951 and operated as a Catholic hospital run by the Felician Sisters until it closed its doors in 1988. During its years of operation, it served as a hospital, a drug rehabilitation center, and later a nursing home. The building has a dark history, filled with stories of suffering, death, and tragedy. Since its closure, The hospital has gained a reputation for being a hotspot for paranormal activity. Visitors and paranormal investigators who have explored the abandoned building report encountering a wide range of ghostly phenomena. The spirits of former patients, nuns, and doctors are said to haunt the hospital's decaying halls. One of the most notorious areas of the hospital is the basement, where the spirits of patients who died during surgery or as a result of botched medical procedures are believed to linger. People have reported hearing disembodied voices, seeing shadowy figures, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread in this part of the building. The chapel, where the nuns once prayed, is another area known for its paranormal activity. Visitors have reported seeing the ghostly figure of a nun kneeling at the altar, as well as hearing the sound of whispered prayers echoing through the empty room. One of the most disturbing stories associated with Yorktown Memorial Hospital is that of a former patient who is said to haunt the second floor. According to legend, this patient was a young woman who died during childbirth. Her spirit is often seen wandering the halls, clutching her stomach and wailing in agony. Some claim that she is searching for her lost child, who was taken away after her death. The hospital's eerie atmosphere and reputation for paranormal activity have made it a popular destination for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. However, many who visit Yorktown Memorial Hospital leave with a sense of unease, believing that the spirits of those who suffered and died within its walls are still very much present. 10. The Donkey Lady Bridge. Location: San Antonio, Texas. The story of the Donkey Lady is one of the most famous urban legends in San Antonio, Texas. The legend dates back to the 1950s and centers around an old bridge on the outskirts of the city known as the Donkey Lady Bridge. The tale is as tragic as it is terrifying. According to the legend, a woman lived with her husband and children on a farm near the bridge. They were a poor family, but they were happy. One day, a wealthy landowner's son visited their farm and, for reasons unknown, got into an argument with the woman. In a fit of rage, the young man set fire to the family's home. The woman managed to escape, but her children perished in the flames. When her husband returned and saw what had happened, he attacked the young man, but was ultimately killed by the landowner's men. The woman, disfigured by the fire and driven mad by grief, fled into the woods. The fire had burned her so severely that her face became grotesquely deformed, with her skin hardened and stretched, giving her the appearance of a donkey. Her hands, too, were said to be so badly burned that they fused into hoof-like appendages. From that day forward, she was known as the Donkey Lady. The legend says that she haunts the area around the bridge, seeking revenge on anyone who dares to cross it. Over the years, countless people have reported encounters with the Donkey Lady, describing a terrifying figure with glowing eyes and a chilling bray that echoes through the night. Some say that if you drive across the Donkey Lady Bridge at night, you might hear her braying from the woods. Others claim that she will attack your car, leaving scratches and dents as she tries to pull you from your vehicle. The bridge has become a popular spot for those seeking a thrill, but many leave with a deep sense of unease, convinced that the Donkey Lady is more than just a legend. 11. The Ghost Tracks of San Antonio. Location: San Antonio, Texas. The Ghost Tracks of San Antonio is one of the most famous urban legends in Texas. The story revolves around a tragic accident that allegedly occurred in the 1930s or 1940s at a railroad crossing near the intersection of Villamain Road and Shane Road in San Antonio. According to legend, a school bus full of children stalled on the tracks, and despite the driver's frantic attempts to start the bus, it was struck by an oncoming train, killing everyone on board. Soon after the accident, strange occurrences began to be reported at the site. It's said that if you stop your car on the tracks and put it in neutral, unseen hands will push your vehicle off the tracks to safety. What's more, people who have tried this say they've found tiny handprints on their car's rear bumper, believed to belong to the ghostly children who perished in the accident. Some skeptics claim that the phenomenon is simply an optical illusion caused by the slightly sloping road, but many locals and visitors swear by their experiences. The legend of the Ghost Tracks has become a popular ghost hunting attraction in San Antonio, with countless people visiting the site each year to test the legend for themselves. 12. The Screaming Bridge of Arlington. Location: Arlington, Texas. The Screaming Bridge is a haunted site in Arlington, Texas, with a dark and tragic history. The story begins in the 1960s when a group of teenage girls from Arlington High School decided to take a late-night drive. They ended up on what was then called the Arlington High Bridge, a narrow, one-lane bridge with a steep drop on either side. As they crossed the bridge, they lost control of their car and plunged off the side, landing in the creek below. The car caught fire, and all the girls inside were killed. After the accident, the bridge earned the nickname Screaming Bridge, as locals began to report hearing the terrifying screams of the girls at night, especially on the anniversary of the accident. Some people also claim to see ghostly apparitions near the bridge, and others have experienced unexplained car troubles when driving in the area. In the years following the accident, the original bridge was torn down and replaced, but the hauntings persisted. Even with the new bridge in place, the screams of the lost girls are still said to echo through the night, leaving an eerie reminder of the tragedy that occurred there. 13. The Driskill Hotel. Location: Austin, Texas. The Driskill Hotel in Austin, Texas is one of the oldest and most luxurious hotels in the state. Built in 1886 by cattle baron Jess Driskill, the hotel has a rich history and is known as one of the most haunted places in Texas. One of the most famous ghosts at the Driskill is that of a little girl who is said to haunt the grand staircase. The story goes that in the late 1800s, the daughter of a U.S. senator was staying at the hotel with her family. While playing on the staircase, she tragically fell to her death. Guests and staff have reported seeing her ghostly figure playing with a ball or skipping down the stairs. Her presence is often accompanied by the sound of a bouncing ball or the giggling of a child. Another well-known spirit is that of Jess Driskill himself. It is said that he haunts the hotel he built, unable to leave it behind. Guests have reported smelling his cigar smoke in the lobby, even though smoking is no longer allowed inside. Some have even claimed to see his apparition wandering the halls, ensuring his beloved hotel is still running smoothly. The hotel is also known for a pair of suicide brides. In two separate incidents, both occurring 20 years apart, two young brides took their own lives in the same room, room 525. Guests who stay in the room report feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair. Some have seen ghostly figures or heard the faint sounds of crying, leading to the belief that the spirits of the two brides remain trapped in the room. The Driskill's long history and its many ghostly inhabitants have made it a popular destination for those interested in the paranormal. Whether you're a guest staying in one of the haunted rooms or simply passing through the lobby, the Driskill Hotel offers an experience that is both luxurious and otherworldly. 14. The Haunted Hill House location, Mineral Wells, Texas. Mineral Wells, Texas, is home to one of the most haunted houses in the state, the Haunted Hill House. Built in the late 1800s, the house has a dark and mysterious history, with a reputation for being a hotbed of paranormal activity. The house was once a brothel and a speakeasy during Prohibition, and it's said that many of the spirits that haunt the house today are the victims of violence and tragedy that occurred there. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and even physical attacks on those who dare to enter. One of the most notorious spirits is that of a little boy named Joshua, who is believed to have died in the house. Guests and paranormal investigators have reported seeing his ghostly figure, hearing his laughter, and even feeling his presence tugging at their clothes. Joshua is known to be mischievous but generally harmless, although his presence adds to the eerie atmosphere of the house. Other spirits are not so friendly. There have been reports of dark, shadowy figures that stalk the halls, and many people have experienced an overwhelming sense of dread when entering certain rooms. Some believe that these spirits are the restless souls of those who were murdered or met untimely deaths within the house. The Haunted Hill House has been featured on numerous paranormal investigation shows and has attracted ghost hunters from all over the world. Despite the terrifying experiences reported by many who have visited, the house remains a popular destination for those brave enough to explore its haunted halls. 15. The Face on the Tombstone. Location: El Paso, Texas. The story of the face on the tombstone is one of El Paso's most enduring mysteries. The tale centers around the grave of a woman named Margarita Cabrera, who died in 1904. Her tombstone, located in the Concordia Cemetery, features an eerie and unexplained phenomenon, a face that appears to be etched into the stone. According to local legend, Margarita was a beautiful young woman who was tragically killed in a horse-riding accident. Her grieving family erected a tombstone in her memory, but shortly after, a strange image began to appear on the stone. The face, which resembles that of a woman in agony, seems to be etched into the stone itself. No one can explain how it got there, and efforts to remove it have been unsuccessful. Over the years, the face has become a source of fascination and fear. Visitors to the cemetery report feeling uneasy when approaching the tombstone, and some claim that the face changes expression or even moves. Others have reported strange occurrences, such as their cameras malfunctioning or strange noises emanating from the grave. The face on the tombstone has attracted the attention of paranormal investigators who believe that the image may be a manifestation of Margarita's restless spirit. The mystery of how the face appeared on the stone and why it remains there continues to puzzle those who encounter it. 16. The Baker Hotel. Location: Mineral Wells, Texas. The Baker Hotel in Mineral Wells, Texas, is a massive, abandoned hotel with a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in the state. Built in 1929, the hotel was once a luxurious destination for celebrities and wealthy guests drawn to Mineral Wells for its supposed healing mineral waters. However, after years of decline, the hotel closed its doors in 1972, and since then, it has become a hotspot for ghostly activity. The most famous ghost at the Baker Hotel is that of the Lady in White. Legend has it that she was a mistress of one of the hotel's managers and lived in one of the top-floor suites. When the affair ended, she became despondent and took her own life by jumping from the hotel's top floor. Her ghost has been seen wandering the halls in a flowing white gown, and some guests have reported smelling her perfume or hearing the sound of her high heels clicking on the tile floors. Another well-known spirit is that of a bellhop who worked at the hotel during its heyday. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported seeing the ghostly figure of a man in a bellhop uniform, often appearing on the staircase or in the lobby. He is said to be a friendly presence, sometimes even offering assistance to guests who have lost their way. The hotel's basement, which once housed a beauty salon and a health spa, is also notorious for paranormal activity. Many believe that the spirits of former employees and guests who died at the hotel still linger in the dark, shadowy corridors. Reports of disembodied voices, cold spots, and eerie sensations are common, and some have even claimed to see ghostly figures lurking in the basement's corners. Despite its dilapidated state, the Baker Hotel remains a popular destination for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. Plans to restore the hotel have been discussed for years, but for now, it stands as a monument to a bygone era, filled with the ghosts of its former glory. 17. The Jefferson Hotel. Location: Jefferson, Texas. The Jefferson Hotel, located in the historic town of Jefferson, Texas, is known for its rich history and numerous ghost stories. Built in the 1850s, the hotel has seen its share of tragedy and mystery, and it is considered one of the most haunted hotels in the state. One of the most famous ghosts at the Jefferson Hotel is that of a young bride who is said to haunt room 19. According to legend, the bride was staying at the hotel on her wedding night when her groom disappeared. Devastated, she took her own life in the room, and her spirit has remained there ever since. Guests who stay in room 19 report seeing her apparition, hearing sobbing, and feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness. Another well-known ghost is that of a little boy named Andrew. He is believed to have drowned in a bathtub at the hotel, and his spirit is said to be playful and mischievous. Guests and staff have reported hearing the sound of a child laughing, seeing small handprints on the windows, and finding toys mysteriously moved around the room. The hotel's corridors and staircases are also known for their paranormal activity. Guests have reported hearing footsteps behind them when no one is there, seeing shadowy figures in the mirrors, and feeling as if they are being watched. The hotel's old-fashioned charm, combined with its eerie atmosphere, has made it a popular destination for those interested in the paranormal. The Jefferson Hotel embraces its haunted reputation, even offering ghost tours and paranormal investigation nights for guests. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's no denying the spooky allure of this historic Texas hotel. 18. The Haunting of White Rock Lake. Location: Dallas, Texas. White Rock Lake, Located just outside of Dallas, Texas, is a picturesque spot popular with locals for picnics, boating, and fishing. However, it is also the setting for one of Dallas's most famous ghost stories, The Lady of White Rock Lake. The story dates back to the 1930s and tells of a young woman dressed in a white evening gown who appears on the side of the road near the lake. According to legend, she flags down passing cars and asks for a ride, saying that she needs to get home. The driver usually agrees, and she gets into the back seat of the car. As the driver approaches the address she gives, they turn around to find that the woman has vanished, leaving behind only a wet spot on the seat where she was sitting. The address she provides is typically found to belong to a family who lost a daughter in a drowning accident at White Rock Lake years earlier. The ghostly figure is believed to be the spirit of that young woman, doomed to eternally search for a way home. Many Dallas residents have claimed to have encountered the Lady of White Rock Lake, making it one of the most enduring urban legends in the area. The story has inspired numerous retellings and remains a favorite among those who enjoy local ghost stories. 19. The Bragg Road Ghost Lights. Location: Saratoga, Texas. Bragg Road, also known as Ghost Road, is a desolate stretch of dirt road near Saratoga, Texas, and is the site of one of the state's most enduring paranormal mysteries, the Bragg Road Ghost Lights. These mysterious lights have been seen by countless people over the years, appearing as floating orbs of light that move up and down the road, often disappearing and reappearing at random. The origin of the lights is the subject of much debate. Some believe they are the spirits of Spanish explorers who were killed by Native Americans in the area, while others think they could be the ghosts of Confederate soldiers who died during the Civil War. Another popular theory is that the lights are the result of a railroad worker who was decapitated in a train accident, with his ghost eternally searching for his lost head. Despite numerous scientific attempts to explain the phenomenon, the cause of the Bragg Road ghost lights remains a mystery. The lights have been attributed to everything from swamp gas to car headlights, but no definitive explanation has been found. The road has become a popular spot for thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts, many of whom drive down Bragg Road at night in hopes of seeing the mysterious lights for themselves. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the eerie atmosphere of Bragg Road and the unexplained lights that appear there make it a place of intrigue and fear. 20. The Bloody Benders of Texas. Location: North Texas. The Bloody Benders were a family of serial killers who lived in Kansas in the 1870s, but their story has ties to Texas, as some believe that members of the Bender family escaped to the Lone Star State after their crimes were discovered. The Benders operated a small inn and general store in Labette County, Kansas, where they would lure travelers in, murder them, and then rob them of their possessions. The family's gruesome crimes were eventually uncovered when a number of bodies were found buried on their property. However, before the authorities could capture them, the Benders fled, and they were never seen again. Rumors and legends abound about where the Benders went after they disappeared. Some believe they made their way to Texas, where they continued their murderous ways under new identities. There are numerous tales of a family matching the Benders' description being seen in North Texas during the late 19th century, and some historians believe that the Benders may have indeed ended up in Texas. Whether or not the Benders actually escaped to Texas remains a mystery, but the story of the Bloody Benders has become part of Texas folklore, a chilling reminder of the dark and violent past that still lingers in the state's history. 21. The Legend of the Chupacabra. Location: various locations in Texas. The Chupacabra, a creature whose name means goat sucker in Spanish, is one of the most infamous cryptids in the Americas. First reported in Puerto Rico in the 1990s, the Chupacabra quickly gained notoriety throughout Latin America and the southern United States, particularly in Texas. The Chupacabra is said to be a small, reptilian-like creature with spines along its back, glowing red eyes, and sharp fangs. The creature allegedly feeds on the blood of livestock, particularly goats, which it drains completely, leaving behind carcasses with puncture wounds in their necks. The first reported sightings in Texas occurred in the late 1990s, when ranchers began finding their animals dead with similar marks. Despite numerous reports and alleged sightings, no concrete evidence of the Chupacabra's existence has ever been found. Some skeptics believe that the Chupacabra is nothing more than a myth, while others argue that it could be a yet-to-be-discovered species or a deformed coyote suffering from mange. The legend of the chupacabra continues to thrive in Texas, with sightings and reports of livestock killings still occurring from time to time. Whether real or imagined, the chupacabra has become a staple of Texas folklore, a symbol of the unexplained and the terrifying creatures that might lurk in the shadows. 22. The Curse of La Llorona Location, Rio Grande Valley, Texas. The legend of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, is a well-known tale throughout the southwestern United States and Mexico, and Texas is no exception. According to the legend, La Llorona was a beautiful woman named Maria who drowned her children in a fit of rage after discovering that her husband was unfaithful. Consumed by guilt and despair, she drowned herself as well. However, she was denied entrance to heaven and is cursed to wander the earth for eternity, searching for her lost children. La Llorona is often depicted as a ghostly figure dressed in white, wailing and crying out for her children near bodies of water. In Texas, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley, there have been numerous reports of encounters with La Llorona. Residents claim to have heard her cries at night, especially near rivers and lakes, and some have even reported seeing her ghostly figure drifting along the banks of the Rio Grande. The story of La Llorona is often used as a cautionary tale to warn children about the dangers of being near water alone, but for many, the legend is much more than just a story. The fear of encountering La Llorona is very real, and her presence is believed to be a bad omen, signaling tragedy or death. 23. The Ghost of the Menga Hotel. Location: San Antonio, Texas. The Menga Hotel, located next to the Alamo in San Antonio, is one of the oldest and most haunted hotels in Texas. Built in 1859, the Menga Hotel has a rich history and has hosted many famous guests, including U.S. presidents, military leaders, and celebrities. However, it is also home to numerous spirits, making it one of the most haunted locations in the state. One of the most famous ghosts at the Menga Hotel is that of Sally White, a chambermaid who worked at the hotel in the late 19th century. Sally was tragically murdered by her husband in 1876 after a domestic dispute. The hotel paid for her funeral, and she was buried in a nearby cemetery. However, it is said that Sally never left the hotel. Guests and staff have reported seeing her ghostly figure in a long grey dress, still performing her duties as a maid. She is often seen walking through the halls or cleaning rooms, only to disappear when approached. Another well-known spirit is that of Captain Richard King, the founder of the famous King Ranch. Captain King was a frequent guest at the Menga Hotel and even had a suite named after him. After his death in 1885, it is said that his ghost returned to the hotel. Guests staying in the King Ranch suite have reported seeing his apparition, often sitting in his favorite chair, and hearing the sound of his boots walking across the floor. The hotel is also said to be haunted by various other spirits, including former guests and employees who have passed away over the years. The ghostly activity at the Menga Hotel has made it a popular destination for paranormal enthusiasts, and it remains one of the most haunted hotels in Texas. 24. The Witch of Old Alton. Location: Denton, Texas. The story of the Witch of Old Alton is a lesser-known but chilling tale from Denton, Texas. The legend revolves around an old woman who lived in the small community of Old Alton in the late 19th century. She was rumored to be a witch, practicing dark magic and casting spells on those who crossed her. The townspeople, fearing her power, ostracized her and avoided her at all costs. One day, a group of local men decided to confront the old woman, accusing her of witchcraft. They dragged her to a nearby tree, where they hanged her in an attempt to rid the town of her evil influence. As she was dying, the witch cursed the men in the town, vowing that her spirit would never rest and that she would return to seek revenge. Soon after her death, strange occurrences began to plague the town. Crops failed, livestock died mysteriously, and people reported seeing the ghostly figure of the old woman wandering the woods near where she was hanged. The tree where she was executed became known as the Witch's Tree, and locals claimed that it was cursed. Anyone who dared to cut it down or disturb the area would meet with a tragic fate. Over time, Old Alton was abandoned and the area became overgrown and desolate. However, the legend of the Witch of Old Alton persisted. Those who venture into the woods near the site of the old town report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread hearing strange whispers, and even seeing the apparition of the witch herself, still seeking revenge on those who wronged her. 25. The Goatman of Cameron Park. Location: Waco, Texas. Cameron Park, located in Waco, Texas, is a beautiful and expansive park known for its scenic trails and lush greenery. However, it is also the setting for one of Waco's most frightening urban legends, the legend of the Goatman. The story of the Goatman dates back to the early 20th century, when a man with severe facial deformities was said to live in the woods near Cameron Park. He was reportedly shunned by society due to his appearance, which resembled that of a feline, with sharp teeth, pointed ears, and slitted eyes. Over time, he became more animalistic, living in the woods and surviving by hunting small animals. According to the legend, the Goatman grew increasingly bitter and angry toward the people who had rejected him. He began to prey on those who ventured too close to his lair, attacking them with a ferocity that left many terrified. Some even claimed that the Goatman had the ability to shape-shift into a large, panther-like creature, making him even more dangerous. Even today, locals claim that the Goatman still roams the park, hiding in the shadows and waiting for unsuspecting visitors. There have been numerous reports of hikers and bikers hearing strange growls, seeing glowing eyes in the darkness, and feeling as if they are being watched. Some have even claimed to see a large, cat-like figure moving swiftly through the trees. The legend of the Goatman has become a part of Waco's folklore, a reminder of the darker side of Cameron Park and the mysterious creatures that may still dwell within its depths. 26. The Slaughterhouse Ghosts. Location: Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo, Texas is home to an abandoned slaughterhouse that is said to be one of the most haunted locations in the state. The slaughterhouse, which operated in the early 20th century, was the site of numerous deaths, both human and animal, and is rumored to be cursed. According to local legend, the slaughterhouse was owned by a man who was cruel and sadistic, mistreating both his workers and the animals. The conditions were horrific, with workers often forced to work long hours in dangerous conditions. Many workers died in accidents or under mysterious circumstances, leading to rumors that the owner was involved in dark rituals and sacrifices. After the slaughterhouse closed, it was left abandoned and fell into disrepair. However, the spirits of those who died there are said to linger, trapped in the place of their suffering. Visitors to the site have reported hearing the sounds of machinery still running, even though the building has been empty for decades. Some have heard the cries of animals and the screams of workers, while others have seen shadowy figures moving through the ruins. The slaughterhouse has become a popular spot for thrill seekers and paranormal investigators, but it is not without its dangers. Many who visit the site report feeling an overwhelming sense of fear and dread, as if the very walls of the building are filled with anger and pain. Some have even claimed to be physically attacked by unseen forces, leaving them with scratches and bruises. The legend of the slaughterhouse ghosts is a chilling reminder of the suffering that took place within its walls, and the spirits that may still haunt the site, unable to find peace. 27. The Man in the Red Hat. Location: Dallas, Texas. The story of the Man in the Red Hat is a ghostly tale from Dallas, Texas, that has been passed down through generations. The legend revolves around a mysterious figure who is said to appear at the Majestic Theater, an old and historic venue in downtown Dallas. The Man in the Red Hat is described as a tall, shadowy figure dressed in an old-fashioned suit with a bright red hat. He is often seen sitting in one of the theater's balcony seats, quietly watching the performances. However, when approached or confronted, the figure vanishes into thin air. According to the legend, the Man in the Red Hat was once a regular patron of the Majestic Theater in the early 20th century. He was known for his distinctive red hat, which he wore to every performance. One night, during a performance, he suffered a fatal heart attack in his seat. Since then, his spirit is said to have returned to the theater, unable to leave his favorite seat. Over the years, theater staff and performers have reported numerous encounters with the Man in the Red Hat. Some have seen him out of the corner of their eye, while others have felt his presence in the balcony, as if someone is watching them. The ghost has become a part of the theater's lore, with many believing that his presence is a sign of good luck for the performers. The Majestic Theater continues to operate today, and the story of the Man in the Red Hat remains a beloved part of its history. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, The legend adds a touch of mystery to this historic venue, reminding visitors of the spirits that may still linger in the shadows. 28. The Headless Horseman of El Paso. Location: El Paso, Texas. The legend of the Headless Horseman is a tale that has been told in various forms across the United States, but in El Paso, Texas, the story takes on a unique and terrifying twist. According to local folklore, the Headless Horseman of El Paso was once a Spanish soldier who was stationed at a fort near the city in the 18th century. The soldier was known for his brutality and cruelty, often mistreating the local Native American population. One day, he was captured by a group of warriors who sought revenge for the atrocities he had committed. They took him to a remote area where they decapitated him and left his body to rot in the desert sun. However, the soldier's spirit did not rest, and soon after his death, stories began to circulate about a headless figure riding a ghostly horse through the desert, searching for his lost head. The Headless Horseman of El Paso is said to appear on dark, moonless nights, his horse's hooves thundering across the desert as he rides in search of revenge. Some say that if you encounter the Headless Horseman, you must avoid making eye contact, even though he has no eyes, or else you will be cursed with bad luck or even death. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of sightings of the Headless Horseman, particularly in the areas surrounding the old fort. Some claim to have heard the sound of galloping hooves, while others have seen the spectral figure riding through the desert, his headless form silhouetted against the night sky. The story of the Headless Horseman has become a part of El Paso's folklore, a chilling reminder of the city's dark past and the spirits that may still roam the desert, searching for vengeance. 29. The Dancing Devil of El Camarón. Location: El Camarón, Texas. The story of the Dancing Devil is a spine-chilling legend that has haunted the small town of El Camarón, Texas, for decades. The tale centers around a dance hall that once stood on the outskirts of town, a popular spot for locals to gather on Saturday nights. According to the legend, one night, a handsome and mysterious stranger arrived at the dance hall. Dressed impeccably in black and exuding a strange, almost otherworldly charm, he quickly captivated the attention of all the women in the hall. He spent the evening dancing with many of them, and as the night went on, his movements became more intense and erratic. At the stroke of midnight, the band began playing a waltz, and the stranger chose a beautiful young woman as his partner. As they danced, the woman began to feel uneasy. She glanced down at his feet and, to her horror, saw that instead of shoes, he had hooves. Realizing that she was dancing with the devil himself, she screamed and tried to pull away, but the stranger only held her tighter. As the other dancers realized what was happening, chaos erupted in the dance hall. The devil laughed maniacally, releasing the woman, who fainted from fear. He then disappeared in a cloud of smoke, leaving the smell of sulfur behind. The dance hall burned to the ground later that night, and many believed it was the devil's doing. To this day, locals say that on certain nights, if you visit the site of the old dance hall, you can still hear the faint strains of music and the sound of hoofbeats echoing in the night. 30. The Ghosts of Presidio La Bahia. Location: Goliad, Texas. Presidio La Bahia, located in Goliad, Texas, is one of the most historic and haunted locations in the state. Built in 1749, this Spanish fort played a significant role in Texas's fight for independence from Mexico. The fort is most famous for the Goliad Massacre in 1836, where nearly 350 Texan soldiers were executed under the orders of Mexican General Santa Anna after they had surrendered. The spirits of those who died in the massacre are said to still haunt the grounds of Presidio La Bahia. Visitors have reported seeing ghostly apparitions of soldiers, hearing the sounds of musket fire, and feeling an overwhelming sense of sorrow and despair when walking the grounds. Some have even claimed to see the ghost of Colonel James Fannin, the leader of the Texan forces, who was among those executed. His spirit is often seen pacing the grounds, his face etched with sorrow. One of the most famous ghost stories from Presidio La Bahia involves the apparition of a headless horseman. According to legend, this spirit is that of a Mexican soldier who was decapitated during a skirmish at the fort. His ghost is said to ride through the grounds on horseback, searching for his lost head. Witnesses have reported hearing the sound of galloping hooves and seeing a headless figure riding through the night. The Presidio La Bahia has been the subject of numerous paranormal investigations, and it remains one of the most haunted locations in Texas. The tragic history of the fort, combined with the lingering spirits of those who died there, creates an atmosphere of profound sorrow and eerie mystery. 31. The Legend of El Muerto. Location: South Texas. El Muerto, or the Headless Horseman of the Plains, is a terrifying legend that originated in South Texas during the 19th century. The story begins with a notorious outlaw named Vidal, who was wanted for horse theft and murder. After a particularly daring raid in 1850, Vidal stole a prized Mustang from a ranch owned by a Texas Ranger named Creed Taylor. Furious, Taylor and his fellow ranger, William Bigfoot Wallace, tracked Vidal across the Texas plains. They'd eventually caught up with him and exacted their brutal revenge. In a grim display of frontier justice, they beheaded Vidal and tied his headless body to the stolen horse, attaching his head to the saddle. They then set the horse loose to wander the plains as a warning to other outlaws. Soon after, people began to report sightings of a headless rider on a wild horse galloping through the night. The ghostly figure became known as El Muerto, and he was said to bring death and misfortune to anyone who crossed his path. Ranchers and travelers reported hearing the sound of hoofbeats and seeing the headless rider appear out of the darkness, only to vanish into thin air. The legend of El Muerto spread quickly, and the fear of encountering the headless horseman kept many people off the trails at night. Some believe that the spirit of Vidal is cursed to ride the plains forever, unable to find peace after his violent death. To this day, stories of El Muerto continue to circulate in South Texas, where the ghostly figure remains a symbol of the lawless and unforgiving nature of the Old West. 32. The Spirits of Spaghetti Warehouse. Location: Houston, Texas. The Spaghetti Warehouse in Houston, Texas is not just a popular Italian restaurant, it's also known as one of the most haunted locations in the city. The building, which dates back to the early 1900s, was originally a pharmaceutical warehouse before being converted into a restaurant. Over the years, it has gained a reputation for paranormal activity, with many employees and patrons reporting eerie experiences. One of the most famous ghosts said to haunt the Spaghetti Warehouse is that of a woman who died in a tragic accident in the building. According to legend, her husband was a pharmacist who worked in the warehouse when it was still a pharmaceutical company. One day, he fell to his death down an elevator shaft. Distraught, his wife passed away shortly after, unable to cope with the loss. It is believed that her spirit now haunts the building, searching for her lost husband. Employees have reported seeing her ghostly figure dressed in a long white gown, wandering through the dining area late at night. She is often seen near the area where the elevator shaft once was, and some have claimed to hear her crying or calling out for her husband. In addition to the woman in white, there are reports of other spirits in the building. Guests have experienced objects moving on their own strange cold spots and the feeling of being watched. Some have even reported hearing disembodied voices and footsteps when the restaurant is empty. The Spaghetti Warehouse has embraced its haunted reputation, and many patrons visit the restaurant in hopes of encountering one of its resident ghosts. The combination of delicious food and ghostly encounters makes it a unique and popular spot in Houston's paranormal scene. 33. The Marfa Prison Ghosts. Location: Marfa, Texas. Marfa, Texas is known for its mysterious lights, but the small town is also home to another eerie location, the old Presidio County Jail. Built in the 1880s, the jail housed many notorious criminals during its years of operation. It's said that the spirits of some of those prisoners never left the building, and the jail is now considered one of the most haunted places in Marfa. One of the most famous ghosts said to haunt the jail is that of a former prisoner who was lynched by an angry mob before he could stand trial. The prisoner, accused of a brutal murder, was dragged from his cell and hanged in the jail's courtyard. His spirit is said to haunt the jail, seeking justice for the wrongful death he suffered. Visitors and staff have reported hearing the sound of chains rattling, seeing shadowy figures in the cells, and feeling a cold presence in the room where the prisoner was held. Another well-known ghost is that of a former jailer who was killed by a group of prisoners during an escape attempt. His spirit is said to still patrol the hallways, keeping watch over the jail. People have reported hearing heavy footsteps echoing through the empty halls, and some have seen a figure dressed in an old-fashioned uniform walking through the building. The jail has been the site of several paranormal investigations, with investigators capturing strange EVP, electronic voice phenomena, recordings, and experiencing unexplained equipment malfunctions. The eerie atmosphere of the jail, combined with its tragic history, makes it a popular destination for ghost hunters and those interested in the paranormal. 34. The Ghost of Emily Morgan. Location: San Antonio, Texas. The Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio, Texas, is named after the legendary Emily D. West, also known as Emily Morgan, who is said to have played a key role in the Texas Revolution. The hotel, located near the Alamo, is housed in a building that once served as a medical facility, which is believed to be the source of its many ghostly inhabitants. One of the most famous spirits said to haunt the hotel is that of Emily Morgan herself. According to legend, Emily Morgan was a yellow rose of Texas who distracted General Santa Anna, leading to the Texan victory at the Battle of San Jacinto. While there is some debate about the accuracy of this story, the legend has persisted, and many believe that her spirit still lingers in the area. Guests at the Emily Morgan Hotel have reported seeing a woman in a white dress wandering the halls, believed to be the ghost of Emily Morgan. She is often seen near the windows, gazing out at the Alamo, as if watching over the historic site. In addition to Emily Morgan's spirit, the hotel is said to be haunted by the ghosts of former patients from its days as a medical facility. Guests have reported seeing apparitions dressed in hospital gowns, hearing the sound of hospital equipment beeping, and feeling cold spots in certain areas of the hotel. Some have even claimed to see the ghostly figure of a nurse moving through the hallways, tending to unseen patients. The Emily Morgan Hotel embraces its haunted history, and it is considered one of the most haunted hotels in San Antonio. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, staying at the Emily Morgan Hotel offers a unique blend of luxury and the paranormal with a touch of Texas history. 35. The Lake Worth Monster. Location: Lake Worth, Texas. The Lake Worth Monster is one of Texas's most famous cryptids, a creature that has been described as half man, half goat, and has been the subject of local legends for decades. The creature is said to reside in the area around Lake Worth, near Fort Worth, and has been spotted by numerous witnesses over the years. The first reported sighting of the Lake Worth Monster occurred in July 1969, when a group of people claimed to see a large, hairy creature with goat-like features near the lake. The creature was said to have scales, stood about 7 feet tall, and was incredibly strong. It reportedly threw a tire at a group of people, scaring them off. Over the next few weeks, more sightings were reported, with people describing the creature as a goatman or a lake monster. Some witnesses claimed that the creature had a white, furry body and large, glowing eyes. The story quickly gained media attention, and the area around Lake Worth became a hotspot for monster hunters and curious onlookers. Despite numerous searches, no concrete evidence of the Lake Worth monster was ever found, and sightings eventually dwindled. However, the legend of the Lake Worth monster has persisted, and the creature has become a part of Texas folklore. Some believe that the creature is still out there, lurking in the shadows of the lake, waiting to be discovered. The story of the Lake Worth monster continues to capture the imagination of those who hear it, blending elements of cryptozoology and the supernatural into a legend that endures to this day. 21. The Legend of the Chupacabra. Location: various locations in Texas. The Chupacabra, a creature whose name means goat sucker in Spanish, is one of the most infamous cryptids in the Americas. First reported in Puerto Rico in the 1990s, the Chupacabra quickly gained notoriety throughout Latin America and the southern United States, particularly in Texas. The Chupacabra is said to be a small, reptilian-like creature with spines along its back, glowing red eyes, and sharp fangs. The creature allegedly feeds on the blood of livestock, particularly goats, which it drains completely, leaving behind carcasses with puncture wounds in their necks. The first reported sightings in Texas occurred in the late 1990s, when ranchers began finding their animals dead with similar marks. Despite numerous reports and alleged sightings, no concrete evidence of the Chupacabra's existence has ever been found. Some skeptics believe that the Chupacabra is nothing more than a myth. while others argue that it could be a yet-to-be-discovered species or a deformed coyote suffering from mange. The legend of the chupacabra continues to thrive in Texas, with sightings and reports of livestock killings still occurring from time to time. Whether real or imagined, the chupacabra has become a staple of Texas folklore, a symbol of the unexplained and the terrifying creatures that might lurk in the shadows. 22. The Curse of La Llorona Location, Rio Grande Valley, Texas. The legend of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, is a well-known tale throughout the southwestern United States and Mexico, and Texas is no exception. According to the legend, La Llorona was a beautiful woman named Maria who drowned her children in a fit of rage after discovering that her husband was unfaithful. Consumed by guilt and despair, she drowned herself as well. However, she was denied entrance to heaven and is cursed to wander the earth for eternity, searching for her lost children. La Llorona is often depicted as a ghostly figure dressed in white, wailing and crying out for her children near bodies of water. In Texas, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley, there have been numerous reports of encounters with La Llorona. Residents claim to have heard her cries at night, especially near rivers and lakes, and some have even reported seeing her ghostly figure drifting along the banks of the Rio Grande. The story of La Llorona is often used as a cautionary tale to warn children about the dangers of being near water alone, but for many, the legend is much more than just a story. The fear of encountering La Llorona is very real, and her presence is believed to be a bad omen, signaling tragedy or death. 23. The Ghost of the Menga Hotel. Location: San Antonio, Texas. The Menga Hotel, located next to the Alamo in San Antonio, is one of the oldest and most haunted hotels in Texas. Built in 1859, the Menga Hotel has a rich history and has hosted many famous guests, including U.S. presidents, military leaders, and celebrities. However, it is also home to numerous spirits, making it one of the most haunted locations in the state. One of the most famous ghosts at the Menga Hotel is that of Sally White, a chambermaid who worked at the hotel in the late 19th century. Sally was tragically murdered by her husband in 1876 after a domestic dispute. The hotel paid for her funeral, and she was buried in a nearby cemetery. However, it is said that Sally never left the hotel. Guests and staff have reported seeing her ghostly figure in a long gray dress, still performing her duties as a maid. She is often seen walking through the halls or cleaning rooms, only to disappear when approached. Another well-known spirit is that of Captain Richard King, the founder of the famous King Ranch. Captain King was a frequent guest at the Menga Hotel and even had a suite named after him. After his death in 1885, it is said that his ghost returned to the hotel. Guests staying in the King Ranch suite have reported seeing his apparition, often sitting in his favorite chair, and hearing the sound of his boots walking across the floor. The hotel is also said to be haunted by various other spirits, including former guests and employees who have passed away over the years. The ghostly activity at the Menga Hotel has made it a popular destination for paranormal enthusiasts, and it remains one of the most haunted hotels in Texas. True Scary Stories from Texas. Story 1. The Phantom Hitchhiker of Bragg Road. Deep within the mysterious Big Thicket of East Texas lies a desolate stretch known as Bragg Road. This 8-mile stretch, shrouded in dense woods and often enveloped in fog, has long been the subject of local folklore. For decades, travelers have reported seeing strange, glowing orbs floating above the road, eerily bobbing and weaving through the trees. But the most chilling legend is that of the phantom hitchhiker, a ghostly figure who appears on the side of the road, desperately seeking a ride. Bill, a seasoned truck driver with years of experience navigating Texas rural routes, was familiar with the tales. He had always dismissed them as mere stories, a way for locals to scare newcomers. But one autumn night, as he was driving down Bragg Road on his way to Beaumont, his skepticism was put to the test. The night was unusually quiet, the only sound the hum of his truck's engine as it cut through the thick darkness. As he rounded a bend, his headlights caught a figure standing by the side of the road. It was a man, tall and gaunt, with his thumb extended in the universal gesture for a ride. Bill, though cautious, couldn't leave a stranded traveler alone in the middle of nowhere. He slowed down and stopped the truck. The man approached, and as he got closer, Bill noticed something unsettling. His clothes were outdated, torn, and dirty, as if he had been wandering the woods for years. But it was the man's eyes that truly unnerved him, hollow, lifeless, yet filled with a deep, unspoken sorrow. The hitchhiker climbed into the passenger seat without a word. As soon as the door closed, the temperature in the cab dropped drastically, and the truck's radio began to emit a low, static-filled hum. Bill tried to engage the man in conversation, asking where he was headed, but the hitchhiker remained silent, staring straight ahead. The air grew thick with tension, and an overwhelming sense of dread settled over Bill. A few miles down the road, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the hitchhiker vanished. Bill glanced over to find the passenger seat empty, the door still locked from the inside. His heart pounded in his chest as he struggled to comprehend what had just happened. He pulled over, stepping out into the cold night air, but there was no trace of the mysterious figure. Only the echo of a haunting, blood-chilling laugh lingered in the air, fading into the night as quickly as it had come. Bill never drove down Bragg Road again. Story 2. The Woman in White of the Austin State Hospital. The Austin State Hospital, Texas' oldest psychiatric institution, has seen its share of suffering and despair since it opened its doors in 1861. Over the years, the hospital has housed thousands of patients, many of whom spent their final days within its walls. The spirits of these tormented souls are said to linger, their presence felt by those who dare to enter the hospital's oldest wings. Among the numerous ghost stories that have emerged from the hospital, none is more tragic than that of the woman in white. According to legend, she was a patient in the early 1900s, committed to the hospital after a series of traumatic events left her mentally shattered. Unable to cope with her pain, she took her own life, hanging herself in one of the hospital's isolated rooms. Since then, her spirit has been trapped within the hospital, doomed to wander the halls for eternity. Those who have encountered the woman in white describe her as a tall, slender figure dressed in a flowing white gown, her face obscured by a long veil. She is often seen in the hospital's old wing, where the paint is peeling from the walls and the air is thick with the scent of decay. Her presence is usually preceded by an icy chill, and those who see her report feeling an overwhelming sense of sadness and despair. Tom, a night security guard at the hospital, had heard the stories but never believed them until one fateful night. As he made his rounds through the old wing, the lights began to flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He shrugged it off as a power surge and continued on his way. But as he approached a particularly dark corridor, he saw her, a woman in white, standing at the far end of the hall, her back turned to him. Tom called out to her, thinking she was a lost visitor, but she didn't respond. He approached cautiously, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. When he was just a few feet away, the woman slowly turned to face him. What he saw made his blood run cold. Her face, partially visible through the veil, was twisted in agony, her eyes hollow and lifeless. Before he could react, she let out a low, mournful wail and began to drift toward him. Paralyzed with fear, Tom could only watch as the woman in white floated past him, her icy breath brushing against his skin. As she moved farther down the corridor, she slowly faded away, leaving only the cold, oppressive air in her wake. Tom immediately reported the incident, but his supervisors dismissed it as a figment of his imagination. Nevertheless, Tom knew what he had seen, and he never returned to that wing of the hospital again. Story 3. The Screaming Bridge of Arlington. Arlington, Texas, is home to a haunting legend that has terrified locals for generations, the tale of the Screaming Bridge. The story dates back to the 1950s when a tragic accident claimed the lives of several teenagers who were driving across a narrow, rickety bridge late one night. As the car reached the middle of the bridge, it suddenly collapsed, plunging the vehicle into the murky waters below. All of the passengers drowned, their desperate screams echoing through the night. Since that fateful night, the bridge has earned a sinister reputation. Locals say that on quiet, moonless nights, the screams of the victims can still be heard, piercing the silence and sending shivers down the spines of those nearby. The bridge itself has long since been rebuilt, but the original structure's cursed legacy endures. A group of college students, skeptical of the legend, decided to visit the bridge one Halloween night. They arrived just after midnight, armed with flashlights and cameras, ready to debunk the myth. The air was still, the only sounds the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. As they stood on the bridge, the students began to joke and laugh, their voices echoing across the water. But their laughter was soon cut short. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the night grew unnaturally quiet. A feeling of unease settled over the group as a faint, distant scream reached their ears. They froze, straining to listen. The scream grew louder, more desperate, as if someone was crying out for help. Then, without warning, the bridge began to tremble beneath their feet. Panic set in as the students felt ghostly hands brushing against them, pulling at their clothes, trying to drag them down into the water below. Terrified, they fled back to their cars, the screams still ringing in their ears. They swore they would never return to the Screaming Bridge, and to this day, they remain haunted by the memory of that night. Story 4. The Cursed House of Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Yorktown Memorial Hospital, located in the small town of Yorktown, Texas, is a place where the veil between the living and the dead is thin. Built in the 1950s and abandoned in the 1980s, the hospital has become a notorious hotspot for paranormal activity. The building, with its decaying walls and empty corridors, exudes an aura of malevolence that draws ghost hunters and thrill seekers from all over the country. The spirits that inhabit Yorktown Memorial are said to be those of former patients, nurses, and even a sinister presence believed to be a demon. Visitors have reported being touched, scratched, and even pushed by unseen forces. Disembodied voices echo through the halls, and shadowy figures lurk in the corners of rooms, watching intruders with malevolent intent. Jenny, a skeptic who had never believed in ghosts, decided to visit the hospital with a group of friends. They arrived just before sunset, armed with flashlights and recording equipment, eager to capture evidence of the supernatural. As they explored the hospital, they experienced the usual unsettling phenomena: cold spots, flickering lights, and faint whispers, but nothing could have prepared Jenny for what she encountered in the basement. While her friends were upstairs, Jenny ventured into the basement alone, curious to see if she could experience anything truly terrifying. The basement was dark and damp, the air heavy with the smell of mold and decay. As she walked through the narrow, crumbling corridors, she felt a growing sense of unease, as if she were being watched. Suddenly, she heard a low growl coming from the darkness ahead. She stopped, her heart pounding in her chest, and shone her flashlight in the direction of the sound. At first, she saw nothing, just the decaying remnants of the old hospital. But as she took a step forward, something caught her eye. A dark figure, crawling out of the shadows on all fours, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Jenny's blood ran cold as the figure rose to its full height, towering over her. It was a man, or what had once been a man, with a twisted, grotesque face and long, sharp claws. The creature let out a guttural snarl, and Jenny turned and ran, her screams echoing through the basement as she fled back upstairs. When she reached her friends, she was pale and trembling, barely able to speak. They quickly left the hospital, vowing never to return. Jenny, once a skeptic, was now a firm believer in the paranormal. She knew that whatever had been lurking in the basement of Yorktown Memorial Hospital was not a lost soul, but something far darker, something that should never have been disturbed. Story 5. The Demon of Goatman's Bridge. Old Alton Bridge, more commonly known as Goatman's Bridge, is a historic iron truss bridge that spans Hickory Creek in Denton County, Texas. The bridge, once used by travelers to cross the creek, is now a site of urban legend and paranormal activity. The most famous tale associated with the bridge is that of the Goatman, a half-man, half-goat creature that is said to haunt the area. According to legend, the Goatman was once a successful African-American goat farmer